I object. Two words that shattered the silence of St. Margaret's Chapel and changed Eleanor Whitmore's life forever. While society expected her to sit quietly through her own humiliation, watching the man who promised her forever marry her younger sister instead, the most feared man in England had other plans. The Duke of Ravencrest didn't just object to a wedding. He declared war on everyone who thought Eleanor Whitmore was someone they could discard. Stay until the end to see how one woman's worst day became the moment she stopped being invisible. Drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit that like button. Eleanor Whitmore had learned long ago that survival in society required a mask. Hers was crafted from practiced smiles, lowered eyes, and the absolute stillness of someone who understood that being noticed often meant being hurt. On this particular spring morning, that mask was the only thing keeping her upright. St. Margaret's Chapel blazed with light. Sunbeams poured through stained glass windows, painting the white marble floors in pools of crimson and gold. The air hung thick with the scent of orange blossoms and expensive perfume. 300 of London's elite crowded into polished pews, dressed in their finest silks and most judgmental expressions. Everyone had come for the spectacle, not the wedding itself. Society weddings were common enough. No, they'd come to see her. Eleanor Whitmore, the jilted eldest daughter, forced by propriety to attend while her younger sister married the man who'd courted Eleanor for over a year, the man who'd written her poetry, who'd held her hand in moonlit gardens, who'd whispered promises about their future while looking into her eyes with what she'd foolishly believed was love. Eleanor sat in the third row, spine straight, hands folded in her lap. Her dove-gray gown had been chosen carefully, elegant enough to avoid criticism, muted enough to avoid attention. It didn't matter. She could feel every eye in the chapel stealing glances her way, waiting to see if she'd crack. "She's handling it well, all things considered," someone whispered behind her. "Though one wonders what she did to drive him away. I heard she was too bookish. Men don't want a wife who thinks she's clever. My cousin said she refused him. Can you imagine? Refusing Thomas Ashford?" The voices buzzed like wasps, each sting carefully aimed. Eleanor's mother, Lady Margaret Whitmore, sat beside her with the rigid posture of a general at war. Her fingers dug into Eleanor's wrist in warning. "Smile," she hissed under her breath. "You will not embarrass this family further." Further. As if Eleanor had done anything wrong. As if she'd chosen this. 6 weeks ago, Thomas Ashford had taken tea with her parents. Eleanor had expected a proposal. Instead, he'd asked for Catherine's hand. Catherine. Her younger sister by 2 years, prettier, sweeter, more docile. Everything Eleanor apparently wasn't. The worst part? Catherine had said yes within the hour. "It's better this way," her mother had told Eleanor that night, voice cold with certainty. "Catherine needs the security. You'll find someone eventually, someone more suitable to your temperament." No one had asked if Eleanor's heart was breaking. No one had cared that Thomas's betrayal wasn't just personal, it was tactical. By switching his attention to Catherine, he'd humiliated Eleanor publicly while securing what he truly wanted, the Whitmore family's connection and dowry, packaged with a wife who wouldn't challenge him. For 6 weeks, Eleanor had endured the whispers, the pitying looks from women who secretly rejoiced in her downfall, the cutting remarks from men who saw her as damaged goods. For 6 weeks, she'd worn her mask and survived. But sitting here now, watching Thomas stand at the altar in his pristine morning coat, Eleanor wondered if survival was enough. The organ began to play. Every head turned toward the entrance. Catherine appeared in a cloud of white silk and Belgian lace, looking every inch the perfect bride. Her golden hair was arranged in elaborate curls beneath a veil that had belonged to their grandmother. Diamonds glittered at her throat. Eleanor's diamonds, or they should have been. The ones their grandmother had promised to the eldest granddaughter on her wedding day. Catherine had claimed those too. Their father walked beside Catherine, beaming with pride he'd never shown Eleanor. As they passed the third row, Catherine's eyes found Eleanor's. For just a moment, beneath the bridal glow, Eleanor saw something else. Triumph. Cold, calculated triumph. Catherine hadn't stolen Thomas from her. They'd planned this together, all of it. The realization hit like a blade between the ribs. Eleanor's mask slipped. Just for a heartbeat, her face showed the raw devastation she'd been hiding. Lady Margaret's nails dug deeper into her wrist. Control yourself. Eleanor forced the mask back into place, but something inside her had cracked. The part that believed if she just behaved perfectly enough, spoke softly enough, caused no trouble. Someone might eventually choose her. No one ever would. She would always be disposable to them. Catherine reached the altar. Thomas took her hand with a smile that had once been Eleanor's. The clergyman opened his book, glasses perched on his nose, ready to begin the ceremony that would seal Eleanor's humiliation forever. "Dearly beloved," he began, his voice echoing through the chapel, "we are gathered here today." The chapel doors slammed open. The sound cracked through the air like thunder. 300 heads whipped toward the entrance. A man stood silhouetted against the morning light, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed entirely in black. For a moment, he was just a dark shape, more shadow than substance. Then he stepped into the chapel, and Eleanor's breath stopped. Adrian Blackthorne, the Duke of Ravencrest. Every person in that chapel knew his name, knew his reputation. The Duke didn't attend social functions, didn't dance at balls or make small talk at garden parties. He appeared only when necessary, to conduct business, sign documents, or destroy someone's life with surgical precision. He was 32 years old and controlled more wealth and power than most men twice his age. His estate covered half of northern England. Members of Parliament sought his favor. The Queen herself had been known to ask his counsel. But it wasn't his title or wealth that made people fear him. It was his absolute lack of mercy. 2 years ago, a baron had spread rumors about the Duke's late mother. Within a month, the baron lost his position at court, his business partnerships, and his standing in every gentleman's club in London. He'd been forced to flee to Scotland in disgrace. The Duke had never raised his voice, never made threats. He simply made it known that anyone who associated with the baron would never do business with Ravencrest again. The baron's ruin had been quiet, absolute, and permanent. Now the Duke of Ravencrest walked down the center aisle of St. Margaret's Chapel like a wolf through a flock of sheep. His face could have been carved from marble, all sharp angles and cold beauty. Dark hair, dark eyes, expression utterly unreadable. His black coat was perfectly tailored, his boots polished to a mirror shine. Everything about him radiated controlled power. The crowd shrank back as he passed. Eleanor couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She'd seen the Duke before, of course, impossible not to, at major events, but always from a distance, always from the anonymous safety of a crowd. He'd never looked at her, never noticed her. But now as he moved down the aisle with deliberate, measured steps, his dark eyes swept the chapel and locked onto hers. The world tilted. His gaze held hers for exactly 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, Eleanor felt seen in a way she'd never experienced. Not evaluated like livestock at market, not dismissed as inadequate. Seen. Then his attention moved to the altar, where Thomas had gone pale, and Catherine clutched her bouquet like a shield. The Duke stopped 10 feet from the altar. "I object," he said. His voice was quiet, controlled, but it carried through the chapel with absolute authority. The clergyman gaped. "Your Grace, There are no grounds for objection unless there are grounds." The Duke's eyes fixed on Thomas with the cold precision of a judge delivering a sentence. Legal grounds, moral grounds, and personal grounds. Thomas found his voice. "This is outrageous. You have no right. I have every right." The Duke pulled a folded document from his coat. "This is a signed contract between Thomas Ashford and Miss Eleanor Whitmore, dated 14 months ago. A formal understanding of courtship with intent to marry, witnessed by 3 parties, including a magistrate." Eleanor's heart stopped. She'd forgotten about that document. Thomas had asked her to sign it after 6 months of courtship, calling it a romantic gesture, a promise between them. She'd been so stupidly in love that she'd signed it without question. "That contract is void," Thomas said quickly. "The lady released me from any obligation." "Did she?" The Duke's voice could have frozen wine. "Strange, because I have here her signature on the contract, but no signature on any release. If she released you, Mr. Ashford, where's the documentation?" Thomas's jaw worked. It was a private understanding." "The law does not recognize private understandings. It recognizes signatures, documentation, evidence." The Duke's gaze swept to Catherine. Tell me, Miss Catherine Whitmore, when did Mr. Ashford first approach you with romantic interest? Catherine's face flushed. That is, 4 months ago, the Duke answered for her, while still under formal contract with your sister. I have statements from 3 witnesses who saw you and Mr. Ashford in compromising circumstances at Lady Pemberton's ball. Witnesses who will testify that this courtship began long before any supposed release from obligation to Miss Eleanor Whitmore. The chapel erupted. Gasps, whispers, the sound of 300 people inhaling scandal like oxygen. Lady Margaret stood, her face white with fury. Your Grace, I don't know what you think you're accomplishing. I'm accomplishing the truth, Lady Margaret. The Duke's attention shifted to Eleanor's mother, and Eleanor saw her flinch. You knew about the contract. You encouraged your younger daughter to pursue a man already promised to your eldest. You orchestrated this entire situation to secure an advantageous marriage, regardless of the damage to your own daughter's reputation and future. How dare you? How dare you? The Duke's voice didn't rise, but the temperature in the chapel dropped 10 degrees. You sold one daughter's dignity to purchase another's status. You turned a private betrayal into public humiliation, and you did it all while maintaining the pretense of propriety. Eleanor couldn't move, couldn't breathe. This wasn't happening. The Duke of Ravencrest wasn't defending her, wasn't exposing the ugly truth that her own family had buried. Lord Whitmore stood now, blustering. See here, Ravencrest, I don't care what your title is. Then you're a fool. The Duke's eyes locked on Eleanor's father. Because my title is the only thing standing between your family and absolute ruin. One word from me, and every door in London closes to you. Every business partnership dissolves. Every invitation vanishes. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Lord Whitmore's face went from red to purple. You wouldn't dare. Try me. 2 words, spoken quietly, absolutely. Lord Whitmore sat down. The Duke turned to face the congregation. For 6 weeks, I've watched London society whisper about Eleanor Whitmore, question her character, speculate about what she did to drive away her suitor. I've heard her called difficult, cold, undesirable. His voice carried to every corner of the chapel. The truth is simpler and uglier. Thomas Ashford is a fortune hunter who courted the eldest daughter, then switched to the younger when he realized she'd be easier to control. The Whitmore parents are social climbers who sacrificed one daughter's happiness for the other's advantageous match. And all of you, his gaze swept the crowd, were eager to blame the victim because it was easier than questioning the system that created this situation. The silence was deafening. Eleanor felt tears burning behind her eyes, not from humiliation now, from something else. Something that felt dangerously like hope. Thomas found his courage, or his desperation. This is madness. Your Grace, I don't know what interest you have in this matter, but my interest, the Duke interrupted, his voice soft and deadly, is that I will not stand by and watch a good woman destroyed by small, cruel people. He turned and walked directly toward Eleanor. The crowd parted like water. Eleanor's mother hissed, "Don't you dare!" The Duke stopped in front of Eleanor. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. Taller than she'd realized. His dark eyes held depths she couldn't read. He extended his hand. "Miss Whitmore," he said quietly, for her ears alone, "you have a choice. You can sit here and let them finish this mockery. Let them marry while you suffer in silence. Accept what they've decided for you." His hand remained steady. "Or you can take my hand and walk out of this chapel. Show everyone here that you are not powerless, that you refuse to be treated as disposable." Eleanor's world narrowed to that outstretched hand. Her mother's voice cut through the haze. "Eleanor Margaret Whitmore, if you move from that seat, you are no longer my daughter." The threat should have paralyzed her, should have sent her back behind her mask, back into silence. But Eleanor looked at her mother's face and saw no love there, only calculation, fear of scandal, concern for status. She looked at her father, who'd never once asked if she was hurt. She looked at Catherine, who'd stolen Eleanor's future without a moment of remorse. She looked at Thomas, who'd broken her heart and expected her to smile through it. Not one of them had defended her. Not one had chosen her. But this man, this dangerous, powerful stranger, had walked into a chapel full of England's elite and declared that she'd been wronged. Eleanor's hand trembled as she reached out. Her fingers touched his. His hand closed around hers, warm and solid and steady. Lady Margaret stood. "Eleanor, so help me." "Let her go," the Duke said, his voice quiet but absolute. He helped Eleanor to her feet with unexpected gentleness. "She's done letting you make her choices." Eleanor stood on shaking legs. The Duke kept his hand wrapped around hers, anchoring her. "If you leave now," Lord Whitmore warned, "you leave with nothing, no dowry, no support. You'll be ruined." The Duke's expression could have melted steel. "She leaves with her dignity, which is more than anyone in this room offered her." He looked down at Eleanor. "Can you walk?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Then walk with me." They moved down the aisle together. Every face turned to watch. Every mouth hung open. 300 people witnessing the impossible. Eleanor Whitmore, the quiet, overlooked eldest daughter, walking away from her own humiliation on the arm of the most powerful man in England. Catherine's voice rang out, shrill with panic. "You can't just leave. The wedding—" The Duke didn't even turn. "Proceed without an audience. I'm sure you'll both be very happy." His tone made it clear he thought the opposite. They reached the chapel doors. Sunlight poured through, almost blinding. Eleanor's legs threatened to give out. The Duke's arm came around her waist, supporting her weight. "Almost there," he murmured. "Just a few more steps." They crossed the threshold together. Behind them, chaos erupted. Voices raised in shock, in scandal, in outrage. A black carriage waited outside, the Ravencrest crest gleaming on the door. The driver jumped down to open it. The Duke helped Eleanor inside with careful hands, then followed her in and shut the door. The driver cracked the reins. The carriage rolled forward. Eleanor collapsed against the velvet seat, trembling from head to toe. Her breath came in short gasps. The mask she'd worn for 6 weeks shattered completely. A sob broke free. Then another. Then she was crying in great heaving gasps, not from sadness, but from relief so profound it physically hurt. She'd walked away. She'd actually walked away. The Duke said nothing. He pulled a handkerchief from his coat and pressed it into her shaking hands, then settled back against his seat, giving her space. Eleanor cried until she had nothing left, until the tears stopped and she was just empty, wrung out, exhausted. She looked up to find the Duke watching her with an expression she couldn't name. "I don't understand," she whispered. Her voice was raw. "Why did you do that?" "Because someone had to." "But why you? You don't even know me." Something flickered in his dark eyes. "Don't I?" Eleanor's heart stuttered. "What?" The Duke leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His gaze held hers with uncomfortable intensity. 3 years ago," he said quietly, "at the Devonshire ball, you were standing in a corner while your mother pushed your sister into conversation with every eligible bachelor in the room. A young woman, the daughter of a merchant, not gentry, was being mocked by a group of debutantes for her dress. You heard it. You walked over, complimented her gown loud enough for everyone to hear, and spent the rest of the evening talking to her while the debutantes seethed." Eleanor's breath caught. She remembered that night, remembered the girl's relieved tears. Two years ago," the Duke continued, "at the opera, you gave your cloak to a flower girl shivering in the rain. Last winter, you organized a collection for families who lost their homes in the factory fire, even though it wasn't fashionable. 6 months ago, you stopped your carriage to help a woman whose horse had bolted, putting yourself at risk." He paused. "I've watched you, Miss Whitmore. Not because I was courting you, I had no right to approach you while you were promised to another, but because in a world full of people who only perform kindness when it benefits them, you showed genuine compassion when no one was watching, when there was no reward except knowing you'd helped someone." Eleanor couldn't breathe. You've been watching me for 3 years?" "I have. No shame, no apology, just quiet truth. And I've watched them treat you like you're invisible, like your kindness is weakness, like you should be grateful for any scraps of attention they throw your way." His jaw tightened. "When I learned what Thomas Ashford had done, when I saw your family forcing you to attend that farce of a wedding, I realized I was done watching, done staying silent, done pretending that honor means standing aside while good people suffer." Eleanor's hands twisted the handkerchief. Everyone will say I seduced you, that I engineered this, that I'm a scandal. Let them. The Duke's voice was cold and certain. I've been called worse by better people. You don't understand. This will destroy me. My reputation. Your reputation was already being destroyed. They were going to make you the villain of this story, no matter what you did. He leaned back. At least this way, you have power. You have choice. And you have me making it very clear that anyone who speaks against you will answer to me. The carriage rolled through London streets. Outside the window, Eleanor could see people stopping to stare at the Ravencrest crest. By nightfall, the entire city would know what had happened. By tomorrow, she'd be the scandal of the season. But she wouldn't be alone. She looked at the Duke, this dangerous, powerful man who'd just upended his own carefully maintained distance from society to defend her. What happens now? She asked. His eyes met hers. Now, he said quietly, you decide what you want. Not what your family wants, not what society expects, what you want. For the first time in Eleanor's life, someone was asking her that question. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I don't know, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. The Duke's expression gentled. Then we'll figure it out. Together. The carriage turned onto a tree-lined avenue. In the distance, Eleanor could see the massive gates of Ravencrest Estate. She was leaving behind everything she'd ever known. Her family. Her home. Her entire life. But as the carriage rolled forward and the Duke sat across from her with steady certainty in his eyes, Eleanor realized something. For the first time since she was a little girl, she wasn't afraid. And for the first time in her entire life, someone had chosen her. Really chosen her. The carriage passed through the gates of Ravencrest Estate, and Eleanor Whitmore, the overlooked daughter, the jilted woman, the scandal, took her first breath of freedom. Ravencrest Estate rose from the landscape like something out of a dark fairy tale. Stone towers pierced the sky, their surfaces weathered by centuries of northern wind and rain. Ancient oaks lined the approach, their branches creating a tunnel of shadow that swallowed the carriage whole. Eleanor had seen grand houses before. Her family moved in circles that included earls and viscounts, men with ancestral homes and inherited wealth. This was different. This was power made physical. Old power. The kind that didn't need to prove itself because everyone already knew it existed. The carriage stopped before massive oak doors. The Duke stepped out first, then offered his hand to help Eleanor down. Her legs wobbled as her feet touched the gravel drive. Steady, he said quietly. His hand remained at her elbow, supporting her weight. The doors opened. A tall, thin man in impeccable butler's livery appeared, his expression carefully neutral. If he was surprised to see his master arriving with a distressed young woman in a gray gown, he gave no sign. Your Grace, he said with a slight bow. We were not expecting you. Circumstances changed, Morrison. The Duke guided Eleanor toward the entrance. This is Miss Eleanor Whitmore. She'll be staying with us. Please have the blue suite prepared immediately and send word to Mrs. Crawford that we'll need a lady's maid. Morrison's eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch, the most emotion Eleanor suspected he ever showed. Of course, Your Grace, should I notify anyone of Miss Whitmore's presence? No. The Duke's voice was flat. For now, we maintain privacy. No visitors. No correspondence in or out without my approval. Very good, sir. They crossed the threshold into an entrance hall that could have swallowed Eleanor's family home whole. Marble floors stretched in every direction. A massive staircase curved upward, its banister carved from dark wood that gleamed with polish. Portraits lined the walls, generations of blackthorns staring down with varying degrees of severity. Eleanor felt small, overwhelmed. Her breath came too fast. The Duke's hand tightened on her elbow. Morrison, have tea sent to my study, and perhaps something stronger. Immediately, sir. The Duke steered Eleanor down a corridor, away from the oppressive weight of the entrance hall. He opened a door and guided her into a room that was somehow both grand and intimate. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls. A massive desk sat before tall windows that overlooked gardens stretching toward distant woods. 2 leather chairs flanked a fireplace where a fire crackled, taking the chill from the air. Sit, the Duke said gently, guiding her to one of the chairs. Eleanor sank into the leather, her body finally giving up the fight to stay composed. She felt wrung out, empty, like someone had reached inside her and pulled out everything that made her function. The Duke moved to a sideboard and poured amber liquid into a crystal glass. He pressed it into her hands. "Drink." "I don't—" Eleanor's voice cracked. "I don't drink spirits." "Today you do." His tone left no room for argument. "Small sips. It will help." Eleanor raised the glass to her lips. The liquid burned going down, but warmth spread through her chest. She took another sip, then another. The Duke settled into the chair across from her, watching her with that same unreadable expression. "Better?" he asked after a moment. Eleanor nodded. The shaking had stopped. The panic had receded to manageable levels. "Good." He leaned back, crossing one ankle over his knee. "Now we need to discuss practicalities." Reality crashed back in. Eleanor looked down at her hands, still clutching the crystal glass. "Everyone saw. Everyone knows." "Yes. By tonight, the entire city will be talking about what happened." "Undoubtedly. They'll say I'm your mistress, that I orchestrated the whole thing to trap you into—" Eleanor. The use of her first name stopped her cold. The Duke leaned forward, elbows on knees, his dark eyes locked on hers. "Listen to me very carefully. I don't care what they say. I've never cared what they say. And neither should you." "Easy for you to say," Eleanor whispered. "You're a duke. You have power. I have nothing. You have me." 3 words spoken with absolute certainty. "And I have resources they can't imagine." A knock at the door interrupted them. Morrison entered with a tea service, setting it on the small table between them. He poured for Eleanor with practiced efficiency, added sugar without asking, and withdrew in silence. Eleanor wrapped her hands around the warm cup, grateful for something to hold. The Duke watched her for a long moment. "Tell me something," he said finally. "When Thomas Ashford first approached you, what did you see in him?" The question caught her off guard. Eleanor took a sip of tea, organizing her thoughts. "He was charming, attentive. He made me feel like I mattered." "And when did that change?" Eleanor closed her eyes, remembering. "About 8 months ago, he started criticizing small things, the books I read, the causes I supported. He said I needed to focus more on domestic accomplishments, that my interests were too political for a future wife." "Did you change?" "I tried." Shame heated her cheeks. "I stopped reading the newspapers he disapproved of, stopped attending the charity meetings. I thought if I became what he wanted, he'd—" Her voice broke. "I thought he'd love me." The Duke's jaw tightened. He didn't want love. He wanted control. "I know that now." "Do you?" The Duke set down his own cup. "Because I've seen women in your position make the same mistake twice. They escape one cage and walk straight into another, grateful just to be chosen." Eleanor's head snapped up. "I'm not that foolish." "Aren't you?" His gaze was relentless. "Right now, you're in my house, under my protection, dependent on my goodwill. The power dynamic between us is even more unbalanced than it was with Ashford. How do you know I won't use that against you?" The question hung in the air like poison. Eleanor set down her cup with careful precision. Her hands had stopped shaking. Her mind had stopped racing. For the first time since the chapel, she felt clear. "I don't know," she said quietly. "But there's a difference between you and Thomas." "What difference?" "You're asking me to question you. He spent a year making sure I never questioned anything." Eleanor met the Duke's eyes. "You disrupted your own life to defend mine. He disrupted my life to serve his ambitions. You're giving me choices. He spent months taking them away." Something shifted in the Duke's expression. Approval, maybe, or respect. "Smart girl," he murmured. "Smart enough to be terrified," Eleanor admitted. "What happens now? I can't go home. Even if my parents would take me back, which they won't, I can't live under their roof after this." "I wouldn't let you." The Duke's voice was flat. "Your family made their choice. They don't get another chance to hurt you." "Then what? I stay here?" Eleanor gestured around the study. "Society will assume Society will assume what I tell them to assume. The Duke stood, moving to the window. He stared out at the gardens, hands clasped behind his back. Here's what's going to happen. You'll stay at Ravencrest as my guest. Mrs. Crawford will serve as your chaperone. She's 60, highly respectable, and has been with my family for 30 years. Tomorrow, I'll have my solicitor draw up documents establishing you as a ward of my household with a generous allowance. Eleanor's throat tightened. Charity? Investment. He turned to face her. You're intelligent, educated, and possess a moral compass that's apparently rare in London society. I have numerous philanthropic ventures that could use someone with your skills and discretion. You're offering me employment? I'm offering you independence. The Duke moved back to his chair. Money of your own, work of your own, a life where you answer to yourself, not to family or husband or society's expectations. It was too much, too good. Eleanor's instinct screamed that there had to be a catch. Why? She whispered. Why would you do all this for me? The Duke was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. My mother, he said, was the daughter of a baron. She married my father because it was arranged, expected. She was 17. He was 45 and already cruel. His jaw tightened. She spent 20 years in this house, isolated and controlled. When she finally died, the physician said it was pneumonia. But I was 14 and I knew better. She died because she gave up, because she had no choices and no hope. Eleanor's breath caught. I swore that day, the Duke continued, his dark eyes meeting hers, that if I ever had the power to give a woman choices, I would. No cages, no control, just freedom and the resources to use it. Silence settled over the study. Outside, birds sang in the gardens. Inside, Eleanor felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of the man sitting across from her. He wasn't rescuing her. He was setting her free. I accept, she said quietly. The Duke nodded once. Good. Morrison will show you to your rooms. Rest. Tomorrow, we'll begin planning your future. Eleanor stood on trembling legs. She made it halfway to the door before turning back. Your Grace? He looked up. Adrian. What? My name is Adrian. We're past formalities. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. And you're about to become the scandal of the century with me. Might as well use my given name. Adrian, Eleanor tested the name. It felt dangerous on her tongue. Thank you for everything. Don't thank me yet, he said softly. The hard part is just beginning. He had no idea how right he was. Eleanor followed Morrison up the grand staircase and down a corridor lined with portraits of stern-faced blackthorns. The blue suite turned out to be larger than her entire bedroom at home, decorated in shades of cream and powder blue. Windows overlooked the gardens. A four-poster bed dominated one wall, already turned down with fresh linens. Mrs. Crawford will be along shortly, Morrison said. In the meantime, I've taken the liberty of having a bath drawn. Your belongings from... That is, we'll arrange for appropriate clothing tomorrow. Eleanor glanced down at her gray gown, wrinkled and tear-stained. She had nothing. No clothes, no possessions, nothing but what she was wearing. She'd walked away from her entire life with literally nothing. The reality hit her like a physical blow. Morrison, showing unprecedented emotion, cleared his throat gently. If I may, Miss Whitmore, I've served the Blackthorn family for 40 years. I knew the late Duchess. You remind me of her, before this house broke her spirit. His eyes met Eleanor's. His Grace will not let that happen to you. He keeps his promises. Then he was gone, and Eleanor was alone in a room 3 times the size of anything she'd ever called her own. She made it to the bed before her legs gave out. The tears came again, but different this time. Not from relief or fear, from grief. She'd lost everything. Her family, her home, her future. Everything she'd known for 24 years. And underneath the grief, something else stirred. Something that felt dangerously like hope. The bath helped. So did the arrival of Mrs. Crawford, a formidable woman with kind eyes and efficient hands who helped Eleanor into a borrowed nightgown and robe. By the time Eleanor crawled into the massive bed, exhaustion had overtaken everything else. She slept without dreams. Morning came too soon. Eleanor woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize. For a heartbeat, she forgot where she was. Then memory crashed back and she sat up so fast her head spun. Ravencrest, the Duke, the wedding, everything. A soft knock at the door preceded Mrs. Crawford's entrance. "Good morning, Miss Whitmore. His Grace requests your presence at breakfast in 30 minutes. She set down a dress of deep green silk. "This should fit reasonably well. It was the late Duchess's. His Grace kept several gowns in storage. He thought you might prefer something elegant for today." Eleanor touched the silk. It was beautiful, expertly tailored, and probably cost more than her entire wardrobe back home. Back home. She didn't have a home anymore. "What's happening today?" Eleanor asked, her voice still rough from sleep. Mrs. Crawford's expression turned grim. "His Grace received 15 calling cards already this morning. The scandal has reached every drawing room in London. Lady Pembroke even had the audacity to appear at the gate, demanding an audience." Eleanor's stomach dropped. Did he see her? He had Morrison turn her away. Mrs. Crawford began helping Eleanor into the dress. "His Grace does not receive visitors he hasn't invited. Titles and status mean nothing when he's made up his mind." The dress fit perfectly, as if it had been made for Eleanor. She caught her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized herself. The woman staring back looked elegant, composed. She looked like she belonged here. The thought terrified her. Morrison escorted her to a breakfast room that somehow managed to be both grand and intimate. Adrian was already there, reading a newspaper with his morning coffee. He looked up when she entered. Something flickered in his dark eyes. "That dress suits you." Eleanor's cheeks heated. "Mrs. Crawford said it was your mother's. I can wear something else if—" "No." His voice was firm. "She would have wanted someone to wear it. Someone who deserved it." He gestured to the seat across from him. "Sit, eat. You'll need your strength." A sideboard held enough food to feed a small army. Eleanor took toast and tea, her stomach too unsettled for more. Adrian folded the newspaper and set it aside. "The Times has a very creative version of yesterday's events. According to them, I've been secretly courting you for months, and the wedding interruption was a dramatic declaration of love." Eleanor nearly choked on her tea. "They what?" "The Morning Post is more sensational. They're suggesting you and I orchestrated the entire thing to humiliate your family. There's even speculation that you've been compromised and I'm being honorable." His mouth twitched. "That one's almost amusing." "This isn't funny," Eleanor said, setting down her cup with shaking hands. "My reputation will survive." Adrian's voice cut through her panic. "I've already had my solicitor draw up the wardship papers. By this afternoon, every major publication will have received a formal statement explaining that you are under my protection as a ward, with Mrs. Crawford as your chaperone. Anyone who suggests impropriety will answer to me." "And if they don't care about your threats?" Adrian's smile was cold. "Then they'll learn why people fear me." A knock at the door. Morrison entered, his expression carefully blank. "Your Grace, there's a situation at the gate." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "Situation?" "Your family, Miss Whitmore. They're demanding entry." The blood drained from Eleanor's face. Adrian was on his feet instantly. "How many?" "All of them, sir. Lord and Lady Whitmore, Miss Catherine, and Mr. Ashford. They're creating quite a scene. The neighbors have noticed." Of course they had. That was the point. Adrian turned to Eleanor. "Do you want to see them?" Every instinct screamed no, but Eleanor forced herself to think past the fear. If she refused to see them, they'd camp at the gates. They'd make enough noise that the scandal would grow worse. They'd paint her as a frightened child being controlled by the Duke. "Yes," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I'll see them." Adrian studied her face. "You're certain?" "No, but hiding won't make them go away." Something like pride flashed in his eyes. "Very well. Morrison, show them to the formal drawing room. Eleanor and I will meet them there." He looked at Eleanor. "You don't have to do this alone. I'll be with you. They'll say you're controlling me." "They'll say that regardless." Adrian moved around the table and offered his arm. "Let them come. Let them see that you chose this, that you chose yourself. Eleanor took his arm, drawing strength from his steady certainty. They walked together through corridors that felt less intimidating with him beside her. The formal drawing room was massive, decorated in shades of deep blue and gold. Her family stood in the center, looking small and out of place against the grandeur. Her mother saw her first. "Eleanor, thank heavens, we've been frantic." "Don't." Eleanor's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Don't pretend you were worried." Lady Whitmore's expression shifted, calculation replacing false concern. "You've caused quite enough drama, young lady. It's time to come home and let us handle this mess you've created." "Mess I've created?" Eleanor's laugh was sharp. "I created nothing. You orchestrated my humiliation. You chose Catherine's happiness over mine. You forced me to attend that wedding." "We did what was best for the family," her father said, his voice pompous. "Catherine's marriage to Thomas secures your social position," Eleanor finished. "Your connections, your wealth. Nothing to do with Catherine's happiness or mine, just your ambition." Thomas stepped forward, his handsome face arranged in what Eleanor recognized now as practiced sincerity. "Eleanor, please, let's discuss this rationally. I made a mistake. You made a choice." Eleanor's voice was ice. "You courted me for over a year while planning to marry my sister. That's not a mistake. That's strategy." Catherine, beautiful in a traveling dress of pale pink, finally spoke. "You're being dramatic. Thomas and I fell in love. These things happen." "Did you fall in love before or after you realized he wanted the Whitmore name and fortune?" Eleanor asked quietly. "Before or after you decided that taking what was mine was more important than loyalty to your own sister?" Catherine flushed. "I didn't take anything. He chose me. That's not my fault." "You're right," Eleanor said. "His betrayal is his fault. But your cruelty? That's all yours." "Enough!" Lady Whitmore's voice cracked like a whip. "You will stop this tantrum immediately and return home. We'll say you were overcome with emotion, that the Duke kindly offered shelter. We can still salvage—" "No." One word. Final as a door slamming shut. Her mother's eyes went cold. "What did you say?" "I said no." Eleanor felt Adrian's presence at her back, solid and sure. "I'm not coming home. I'm not salvaging anything. I'm done being the daughter you sacrificed for your ambitions." Lord Whitmore turned purple. "You ungrateful child! After everything we've done for you, what have you done?" Eleanor's control finally cracked. "You raised me to be quiet, obedient, invisible. You taught me that my worth depended on making everyone else comfortable. You let Thomas court me for a year, then threw me away the moment Catherine showed interest. You forced me to sit in that chapel and watch my own humiliation. Tell me, Father, what exactly should I be grateful for?" Silence crashed through the room. "We gave you a home," her mother said finally, her voice shaking with rage. "Food, education, a place in society. And this is how you repay us? By running to the first man who shows you attention? By becoming the Duke of Ravencrest's—" "Finish that sentence," Adrian said, his voice soft and deadly, "and you'll regret it." Lady Whitmore's mouth snapped shut. Adrian moved to stand beside Eleanor. "Miss Whitmore is now my ward, with full legal protection under my name and household. She has an independent allowance, her own employment, and the full weight of my resources behind her. Any attempt to coerce, manipulate, or harm her will be met with immediate and permanent consequences." "You can't just steal our daughter," Lord Whitmore blustered. "I didn't steal anything. She walked away. There's a difference." Adrian's eyes were cold. "And given that you clearly view her as property to be managed, I'd say she made the right choice." Thomas found his courage. "Your Grace, with all respect, you don't know Eleanor the way we do. She's been sheltered, naive. She doesn't understand the implications of—" "I understand perfectly," Eleanor said. Her voice didn't shake. "I understand that you wanted a docile wife you could control. I understand that my family valued social advancement over my happiness. And I understand that staying would mean accepting that I deserve to be treated as disposable." She took a breath. "So I'm choosing differently. I'm choosing freedom. I'm choosing a future where I matter. Catherine's eyes filled with angry tears. You're being selfish. What about our family's reputation? What about you? Eleanor interrupted. That's what you mean. What about your wedding, your marriage, your happiness? It never occurred to you to ask what about mine. Because you were never going to be happy anyway. Catherine's voice rose raw and ugly. You're too serious, too opinionated, too difficult. Thomas didn't want you. No one wanted you. I did you a favor by taking him off your hands. The words hit like physical blows. Lady Whitmore grabbed Catherine's arm. That's enough. But the damage was done. Eleanor looked at her younger sister, the golden child, the favorite, the one who'd stolen her future without a shred of remorse, and felt something break free inside her chest. Not her heart. That had already broken. Her chains. You're right, Eleanor said quietly. Thomas didn't want me. He wanted someone he could mold into his perfect vision of a wife. Someone who would smile and nod and never challenge him. Someone who would be grateful just to be chosen. She smiled, and it was sharp as glass. Congratulations, Catherine. You won the prize. I hope you enjoy your life with a man who views you as an acquisition. She turned to her parents. As for you, I'm done. Done trying to earn love you're incapable of giving. Done making myself smaller so everyone else feels bigger. Done accepting crumbs and calling it kindness. Eleanor, her mother started. Miss Whitmore, Eleanor corrected. We're not family anymore. You made that choice when you sacrificed me for social advancement. Now I'm making mine. Adrian moved toward the door. Morrison will show you out. Don't return. You're not welcome at Ravencrest. You can't ban us, Lord Whitmore sputtered. We're her parents. You were her parents. Now you're nothing. Adrian's voice could have frozen blood. And if you think I'm bluffing, test me. See what happens when I withdraw my investments from your ventures. When I let it be known that anyone who does business with you will lose my favor. When I make certain that every door in London closes to your family. The threat hung in the air, absolute and terrifying. Morrison appeared to escort them out. Lady Whitmore drew herself up with wounded dignity. You'll regret this, both of you. I doubt it, Eleanor said. She watched them leave, her mother's rigid spine, her father's blustering anger, Catherine's tears, Thomas's calculation. Watched the door close behind them, watched her old life end. The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor's legs gave out. She sank into the nearest chair, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Adrian knelt in front of her. Breathe, he said quietly. You're safe. They're gone. Eleanor couldn't find words. I can't believe You were magnificent. Adrian's hands covered hers, warm and steady. Strong and clear and absolutely magnificent. Eleanor looked up at him through tears. They hate me now. They hated you before. Now they simply can't pretend otherwise. His thumbs traced circles on her wrists, grounding her. You chose yourself, Eleanor. That takes more courage than anything else you could have done. The tears came then, hard and fast, but different from before. These were tears of release. Adrian let her cry, his presence steady and sure. When the storm finally passed, Eleanor felt empty, clean, free. What happens now? She whispered. Adrian's dark eyes met hers. Now? Now we show London exactly what happens when someone chooses to fight back. He smiled, sharp and dangerous and full of promise. And trust me, Eleanor, they're not going to like it at all. Eleanor didn't understand what Adrian meant until 3 days later, when London society began to crumble around those who'd wronged her. She spent those first days at Ravencrest learning to breathe again, learning that silence could be peaceful instead of suffocating, learning that she could walk through rooms without making herself smaller, speak without measuring every word, exist without constantly calculating how to avoid someone's displeasure. Mrs. Crawford became her unexpected ally, teaching her the unspoken rules of navigating the Duke's household while sharing quiet confidences about the late Duchess. Morrison, despite his stern exterior, left books on her breakfast tray, volumes on philosophy and politics that would have scandalized her mother. Adrian himself was a study in contradictions. During the day, he conducted business with cold efficiency, meeting with solicitors and bankers and men whose names Eleanor recognized from Parliament. But in the evenings, he joined her in the library, discussing everything from agricultural reform to women's education as if her opinions actually mattered. As if she mattered. On the third morning, Eleanor came down to breakfast to find Adrian reading correspondence with an expression that could have curdled milk. "What's wrong?" she asked, taking her usual seat. He slid a letter across the table without a word. Eleanor recognized her father's handwriting immediately. Her stomach dropped as she read. Lord Whitmore was demanding her return, threatening legal action, claiming the Duke had no right to harbor his daughter, that Eleanor was mentally unwell and needed her family's care. He'd enlisted a magistrate, a family friend, to support his claim. "He's trying to have me declared incompetent," Eleanor whispered. Her hand shook. "If a magistrate agrees, no magistrate will agree." Adrian's voice was absolutely calm. "But, because by noon today, Lord Whitmore will have far more pressing concerns than your whereabouts." Something in his tone made Eleanor look up sharply. "What did you do?" Adrian's smile was colder than winter frost. "I didn't do anything. I simply allowed certain information to become public." "What information?" "Your father's business ventures are built on borrowed money and false promises. He owes debts to half of London, secured against property he doesn't actually own, and business deals that exist only on paper. The only thing keeping him afloat is his reputation and the assumption that he's as wealthy as he pretends to be." Eleanor's breath caught. "You're going to expose him." "I already have." Adrian poured coffee with steady hands. "This morning, 3 banks called in loans he can't repay. By this afternoon, his creditors will be circling. By tomorrow, everyone in London will know that Lord Whitmore is bankrupt." The casual devastation in his voice sent chills down Eleanor's spine. "You'll destroy him." "Yes." No hesitation, no regret. "And my mother, Catherine?" "Will face the consequences of their choices." Adrian met her eyes. "I gave your family every chance to walk away quietly. They chose to threaten you instead. Now they pay the price." Eleanor should have felt guilty, should have protested. Instead, she felt a dark satisfaction blooming in her chest. "What about Thomas?" Adrian's smile sharpened. "Mr. Ashford is discovering that his business prospects have suddenly evaporated. Every partnership he was negotiating has fallen through. Every gentleman's club has mysteriously lost his membership application. His family's shipping company just lost 3 major contracts. You're isolating him." "I'm showing him what happens when someone humiliates a woman under my protection." Adrian leaned back in his chair. He wanted Catherine for her connections. Now those connections are worthless. He married into a family that's about to become social pariahs. I hope she was worth it. Eleanor stared at the man across from her, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. This wasn't rescue. This was warfare, precise, calculated, absolutely ruthless. "You're terrifying," she said quietly. "I'm effective." He took a sip of coffee. "And I keep my promises. I promised no one would hurt you again. I meant it." A knock at the door. Morrison entered, his expression as close to agitated as Eleanor had ever seen it. "Your Grace, Lady Pembroke is at the gate again. She's brought Lady Ashworth and the Duchess of Somerset. They're demanding an audience, and they've brought reporters." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Reporters." "From 3 major publications, sir. They're creating quite a scene." This was it, then. The battle Eleanor had been dreading. Society's most powerful women, come to put her in her place. "Send them away," Adrian said flatly. "No." Eleanor's voice surprised even herself. "Let them in." Adrian turned to her. "Eleanor, they're going to force a confrontation eventually. Better here, where I choose the ground." She lifted her chin. "Besides, running away only makes me look guilty." Something flickered in Adrian's dark eyes. Calculation, maybe, or pride. "You're certain?" "No, but I'm tired of being afraid." Eleanor stood, smoothing her borrowed dress. "Let them come. Let's see what they want." Adrian studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Morrison, show them to the blue drawing room. We'll be there shortly." After Morrison left, Adrian moved around the table. He stopped in front of Eleanor, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "They're going to try to intimidate you," he said quietly. "They'll use every weapon in their arsenal. Status, scandal, shame. They'll attempt to make you feel small and wrong and guilty for daring to defend yourself. I know. And if at any point you want them gone, you say the word. Understood? Eleanor nodded, warmth spreading through her chest. When was the last time someone had actually protected her instead of just claiming to? They walked to the blue drawing room together. The three women waiting there were exactly what Eleanor expected: elegant, powerful, and radiating disapproval like heat from a forge. Lady Pembroke stood in the center, 70 years old and sharp as a blade. She'd controlled London society for 4 decades, destroying reputations with a single cutting remark. Lady Ashworth was younger, beautiful in a cold way, married to one of the wealthiest men in England. She set the fashion trends, decided which events mattered, determined who was acceptable and who wasn't. The Duchess of Somerset completed the trio, titled, connected to the royal family, and absolutely convinced of her own superiority. They were society's queens, and they'd come to put Eleanor in her place. Lady Pembroke spoke first, her voice sharp with authority. Your Grace, we've come to discuss this situation with Miss Whitmore, for the good of all concerned. How kind. Adrian's tone could have frozen fire. Please, sit. I'm fascinated to hear your concerns. They arranged themselves on the sofa like judges at a tribunal. Eleanor sat across from them, spine straight, hands folded. Adrian remained standing, a dark presence at her shoulder. Lady Ashworth leaned forward. Miss Whitmore, we understand you've experienced some upset, but this behavior is beyond acceptable. Living unchaperoned with the Duke. She has a chaperone, Adrian interrupted. Mrs. Crawford, who has been with my family for 3 decades and whose reputation is beyond reproach. Nevertheless, the Duchess of Somerset cut in, the appearance is damaging to Miss Whitmore's reputation, to her family, to society itself. Young women cannot simply abandon their families because of romantic disappointment. Romantic disappointment, Eleanor repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. Is that what you call it? What else would you call it, dear? Lady Pembroke's smile was condescending. You were courted. The gentleman chose another. It happens. But throwing a tantrum and running to the Duke of Ravencrest is hardly— He was under contract to marry me. Eleanor's voice cut through the room. A legal document, signed and witnessed. He courted my sister while still bound to me. That's not disappointment. That's betrayal. Lady Ashworth waved a dismissive hand. Contracts can be complicated. I'm sure there were reasons. There were. Adrian's voice was ice. The reasons were that Thomas Ashford is a fortune hunter who realized Catherine was more malleable than Eleanor. And the Whitmore parents were willing to sacrifice their eldest daughter's future for their youngest daughter's advantageous marriage. The three women exchanged glances. That's a harsh interpretation, the Duchess said carefully. I'm sure the Whitmores had their daughter's best interests. They forced her to attend the wedding, Adrian said flatly. Forced her to sit in that chapel and watch her betrayal become public spectacle. Tell me, Your Grace, how is that in her best interests? Silence fell, uncomfortable and thick. Lady Pembroke shifted tactics. Even so, the solution is not to live with you, Your Grace. The scandal is growing worse by the day. People are talking. The only way to salvage Miss Whitmore's reputation is for her to return home, make amends with her family, and conduct herself with appropriate humility. Humility, Eleanor repeated. The word tasted like poison. You want me to apologize for being wronged, to go back to people who treated me as disposable, to accept that I deserve to be humiliated quietly. I want you to understand reality, Lady Pembroke said sharply. You're an unmarried woman of 24 with no title and limited fortune. Your value in society depends entirely on your reputation. Right now, that reputation is in tatters. Your only hope is to repair it through proper behavior and familial reconciliation. My reputation is in tatters because Thomas Ashford betrayed me and my family enabled it, not because I defended myself. Lady Ashworth's eyes narrowed. You're being naive. Fair or not, the world judges women more harshly than men. You can rail against it all you like, but that won't change reality. The longer you stay here, the more people will assume you're the Duke's mistress. Eventually, that assumption becomes fact, whether it's true or not. The accusation hung in the air, ugly and deliberate. Eleanor felt heat rising in her cheeks. Not from shame, from rage. Let me understand, she said, her voice shaking slightly. Thomas can break a legal contract, court another woman, and marry her without consequence. My parents can orchestrate my humiliation for social advancement. My sister can steal my intended husband. But I'm the one who needs to show humility? I'm the one who needs to apologize? You're the one who needs to survive, the Duchess said bluntly. And survival means accepting certain realities. Women in our world have limited options. We must be strategic, careful, willing to bend, willing to break ourselves to fit into boxes men build for us, Eleanor finished. Willing to smile while they hurt us. Willing to call our own oppression reality and teach our daughters to accept it too. Lady Pembroke's face flushed. You ungrateful child. We're trying to help you. Are you? Eleanor stood, no longer able to sit still. Because it sounds like you're trying to force me back into a cage. Back to a family that doesn't value me. Back to a life where I make myself smaller so everyone else feels bigger. She looked at each of them in turn. You want me to accept their version of reality because it's the same version you've all accepted. Because if I refuse to bow, if I choose differently, it makes you question your own choices. The silence that followed was electric. Lady Ashworth rose, her expression cold. You're making a mistake. The Duke cannot protect you forever. Eventually, you'll need society's approval. You'll need marriage, security, a place in the world. And when that day comes, you'll find every door closed to you. Then I'll build my own doors. Eleanor's voice didn't shake. The Duke has made me his ward with an independent income. He's given me employment managing his philanthropic ventures. I don't need marriage for security. I don't need society's approval for survival. I need nothing from any of you. Lady Pembroke stood as well, her eyes hard. You're a fool. You think you're free, but you've simply traded one cage for another. The Duke controls your money, your position, your future. You're more dependent on him than you ever were on your family. The difference, Adrian said quietly, his voice cutting through the room like a blade, is that I have no interest in controlling her, only in ensuring she has choices. He moved to stand beside Eleanor, his presence solid and sure. Let me be absolutely clear, he continued, his dark eyes moving from one woman to the next. Eleanor is under my protection. Anyone who attempts to harm her through gossip, social exclusion, or any other means will answer to me. I will withdraw support from your charities, Lady Pembroke. I will ensure your husband's business ventures fail, Lady Ashworth. And I will make certain the Queen knows exactly how you've conducted yourself, Your Grace. The three women stared at him, shock written across their faces. You wouldn't dare, Lady Ashworth breathed. Adrian's smile was terrible. Test me. The Duchess of Somerset drew herself up. This is outrageous. You cannot threaten peers of the realm. I just did. Adrian's voice was absolutely calm. And unlike most men, I don't make threats I won't carry out. Ask the Baron of Westfield what happened when he crossed me. Ask Lord Harrington why he fled to France. Ask anyone who thought my patience was infinite. He took a step forward, and all three women took an involuntary step back. Eleanor Whitmore is mine to protect. You can accept that gracefully and leave her alone. Or you can fight me, and I will destroy everything you've built. Your choice. Lady Pembroke's face had gone pale. The Duke of Ravencrest threatening violence against women. How noble! Not violence. Not consequences. Adrian's voice was soft and deadly. You've spent decades wielding social power to crush anyone who didn't conform. You've ruined reputations, destroyed lives, forced young women into marriages they didn't want. All from the safety of your drawing rooms, where no one could touch you because of your titles and connections. He smiled, sharp and cold. But I can touch you. My title is higher, my wealth is greater, my connections run deeper. And unlike you, I have absolutely no qualms about using every weapon in my arsenal to protect someone I care about. The room fell silent. Eleanor stared at Adrian, seeing him in a new light. This wasn't just about her, this was about every woman these society queens had crushed. Every girl forced into an unwanted marriage. Every reputation destroyed for daring to be different. This was war, and Adrian was fighting it for all of them. Lady Pembroke recovered first. This isn't over, No, Adrian agreed. It's not. But it will end very differently than you expect. The three women left in a storm of silk and fury, Morrison showing them out with appropriate formality. The moment the door closed, Eleanor's legs gave out. She sank onto the sofa, trembling. Are you all right? Adrian asked quietly. I just made enemies of the three most powerful women in London. You were already their enemy. You'd just stopped pretending otherwise. He sat beside her, closer than propriety allowed. They're terrified, Eleanor, because you represent something they can't control. A woman who chose freedom over security, truth over appearance. They're going to destroy me. They're going to try. Adrian's voice was certain. They'll fail. Eleanor looked at him, this dangerous man who'd upended his entire life to defend hers. Why are you doing this? Really? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. Because I loved my mother, and I watched her die by inches in a world that gave her no choices. Because I have power, and power means nothing if it's not used to protect the powerless. He met her eyes. And because you're the first person I've met in years who's brave enough to choose herself, even when that choice costs everything. Eleanor's breath caught. Adrian. A commotion outside the drawing room cut her off. Raised voices. Morrison's attempts at calm. Then the door burst open. Thomas Ashford stood in the doorway, his face flushed with rage and desperation. Behind him, Morrison looked apologetic and furious. Your Grace, I apologize. Mr. Ashford forced his way. It's fine, Morrison. Adrian stood slowly, his entire demeanor shifting from gentle to lethal. Mr. Ashford was just leaving. Like hell I am. Thomas stumbled into the room. He'd been drinking. Eleanor could smell it from across the space. You've ruined me. You've destroyed everything. And for what? For her? He pointed at Eleanor with shaking hands. She's not worth it. She's cold and difficult and— Finish that sentence, Adrian said quietly, and I'll throw you through that window. The threat was delivered so calmly that it took Thomas a moment to register it. When he did, his face went white. You can't— I can do whatever I want in my own house. Adrian took a step forward. You broke a contract. You humiliated a woman you claimed to care about. You married her sister for money and connections, and now you have the audacity to come here and blame her for your consequences? Thomas's bravado cracked. You don't understand. I needed that marriage. My family's business is failing. Catherine's dowry is now worthless since her father is bankrupt. Adrian's voice was cold. Congratulations, Mr. Ashford. You betrayed Eleanor for nothing. The words hit Thomas like physical blows. That's not— Lord Whitmore said— Lord Whitmore lied about his wealth, his connections, his business ventures, all of it. And now everyone knows. Adrian crossed his arms. You married into scandal and debt. I hope it was worth it. Thomas turned to Eleanor, his eyes desperate. This is your fault. If you'd just been what I needed— What you needed, Eleanor interrupted, her voice steady despite her racing heart, was a woman you could control. Someone who would smile and nod and never question you. Someone grateful enough for your attention that she'd accept whatever scraps you offered. She stood, meeting his eyes. I was that woman for over a year. I changed myself, silenced myself, made myself smaller to fit your expectations. And it still wasn't enough, because what you wanted wasn't a partner. You wanted property. Thomas's face twisted. You think you're better than me now? You're living with a man you're not married to. You're nothing but— He didn't finish the sentence. Adrian moved faster than Eleanor thought possible. One moment he was standing across the room. The next, his hand was wrapped around Thomas's throat, pressing him back against the wall. Say it, Adrian said softly. Call her what you were about to call her. Give me a reason. Thomas's eyes bulged. He clawed at Adrian's hand, gasping for air. Adrian, don't! Eleanor's voice cut through the red haze. He's not worth it. For a long moment, Adrian didn't move. The muscles in his jaw worked. His hand tightened slightly around Thomas's throat. Then he released him. Thomas collapsed, coughing and gasping. Get out, Adrian said, his voice utterly calm. If you come near Eleanor again, I won't stop next time. If you speak her name in public, I'll destroy what's left of your life. If you so much as look at her, I'll make certain you regret it." He turned to Morrison. "Show Mr. Ashford to the gate. If he returns, have him arrested for trespassing." Morrison hauled Thomas to his feet and dragged him from the room. His protests faded down the corridor. Silence fell. Eleanor stared at Adrian, her heart pounding. She'd just seen him nearly kill a man. Should have been terrified. Instead, she felt safe. "Thank you," she whispered. Adrian turned to her, and the cold fury in his eyes gentled. "I told you, no one hurts you, not anymore." He moved toward her, then stopped himself. "I shouldn't have lost control like that. If I frightened you, you haven't." Eleanor took a step closer. "You defended me. Again. I nearly strangled him. He deserved it." Eleanor shocked herself with the vehemence in her voice. "He broke my heart, humiliated me publicly, married my sister, and then came here to blame me for his own failures. You showed restraint." Adrian's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "That's a generous interpretation." "It's the truth." They stood in the center of the drawing room, closer than propriety allowed, looking at each other with something that felt dangerous and inevitable. Adrian broke first. He stepped back, putting distance between them. "You should rest. It's been a difficult morning." Eleanor nodded, not trusting her voice. She made it halfway to the door before turning back. "Adrian? What you said to those women about protecting me, did you mean it?" His dark eyes met hers. "Every word. Even if it costs you everything?" "Especially then." His voice was absolutely certain. "Some things are worth fighting for, Eleanor. You're one of them." Eleanor fled to her room before the tears could fall, but these weren't tears of sadness or fear. These were tears of something else entirely, something that felt dangerously like hope, like belonging, like love. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She paced her rooms, mind racing with everything that had happened. The confrontation with society's queens, Thomas's desperate visit, Adrian's absolute certainty that he would protect her no matter the cost. Near midnight, she gave up on sleep and made her way to the library. She discovered it her second day at Ravencrest. 2 stories of books, comfortable chairs, and windows overlooking the moonlit gardens. She wasn't alone. Adrian stood at the tall windows, silhouetted against the night. He'd discarded his coat and waistcoat, standing in shirt sleeves and suspenders. It was the most informal she'd ever seen him. "Can't sleep either?" he asked without turning. Eleanor moved to join him at the window. "Too much thinking about what happened today. About everything." She looked out at the gardens, silver in the moonlight. "A week ago, I was attending my sister's wedding. Now I'm living with a duke, making enemies of the most powerful women in England, and watching my family crumble." "Regrets?" Eleanor considered the question honestly. "No, that's what scares me. I should regret this, should feel guilty, but I don't." "Good." Adrian's voice was quiet. "Guilt is a weapon people use to keep you in place. Don't give it power over you." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the night. "Can I ask you something?" Eleanor said finally. "Always. Why did you really interrupt that wedding? The truth this time." Adrian was quiet for so long, Eleanor thought he wouldn't answer. Then, softly, "Because I couldn't watch them destroy you." "You said you'd been watching me for 3 years." "Yes. Why?" He turned to face her, and the expression in his dark eyes made her breath catch. "Because you were kind when kindness cost you. Because you helped people without expectation of reward. Because in a world of calculated moves and strategic alliances, you were genuine." He paused. "Because I looked at you and saw someone worth knowing, worth protecting, worth—" He stopped himself. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. "Worth what?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "It doesn't matter. It does to me." He looked at her for a long moment, something warring in his expression. Then he stepped back, creating distance. "You should return to your room. It's late." "Adrian, Eleanor, please." His voice was strained. "There are lines I won't cross. Not while you're under my protection. Not while the power between us is so unbalanced." Understanding crashed over her. He wanted her, had perhaps wanted her for years, but he refused to act on it because he feared it would be another form of control. The realization made her chest ache. What if I wanted to cross those lines? She whispered. Adrian's hands clenched into fists. Don't. Why not? Because right now, you're vulnerable, grateful, trying to make sense of everything that's happened. His voice was rough. And I won't be another man who takes advantage of that. I won't be Thomas. You're nothing like Thomas. I could be. His eyes met hers, dark and tortured. The power I hold over you is absolute, Eleanor. Your home, your income, your position, all of it depends on me. If I pursued you now, how would you know it was a real choice? How would I? The question hung between them, painful and honest. Eleanor had no answer. After a moment, she nodded and turned toward the door. She was halfway across the library when Morrison burst in, his composure completely shattered. Your Grace, Miss Whitmore, you need to see this. Now. The urgency in his voice sent ice through Eleanor's veins. They followed him to the entrance hall, where 3 footmen were gathered around something on the floor. A brick, wrapped in paper. Adrian picked it up, unfolding the note attached. Eleanor watched his expression shift from confusion to cold fury. What is it? She asked. He handed her the note. The words were cut from newspaper, arranged to form a message. The whore will pay, sinners burn. Eleanor's hands shook. Someone threw this through the window? The library window, Morrison confirmed, minutes after you both left the room. Adrian's voice was deadly calm. How many people knew we were in the library? Only the household staff, Your Grace, and they're beyond reproach. Then someone's watching the house. Adrian turned to the nearest footman. Double the guard. No one enters or leaves without my knowledge. Send word to the magistrate and my solicitor. He looked at Eleanor, his expression unreadable. This changes things, he said quietly. Eleanor's mouth went dry. What do you mean? Adrian's jaw tightened. Someone just made a threat against your life. In my house. Under my protection. He handed the note to Morrison. Find out who did this. I don't care what it costs. I don't care who you have to threaten or bribe. I want a name by morning. Morrison nodded and disappeared. Adrian turned to Eleanor. Pack a bag. We're leaving Ravencrest. What? Why? Because whoever did this knows where you sleep, knows your routines, and I won't risk your safety. His voice was absolutely certain. We're going somewhere they can't find you. Eleanor's world tilted. Where? Adrian's eyes met hers, dark and determined. Somewhere no one will think to look. Somewhere we can disappear until I've dealt with this threat. He took her hand, his grip warm and steady, despite the danger swirling around them. Trust me, Eleanor, just a little longer. Trust me to keep you safe. Eleanor looked at the shattered window, at the brick and its hateful message, at this man who'd already risked everything to protect her and was preparing to risk even more. She had no real choice. But somehow, with Adrian's hand wrapped around hers and determination burning in his dark eyes, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Protected, valued, chosen. I trust you, she whispered. The smile Adrian gave her was fierce and full of promise. Then let's disappear. Within the hour, Eleanor found herself in an unmarked carriage racing through the dark countryside, Adrian beside her and 2 armed guards riding behind. They'd left Ravencrest through a servant's entrance, avoiding the main gates where whoever had thrown that brick might still be watching. Mrs. Crawford had packed Eleanor's things with ruthless efficiency, including the green silk dress and several others from the late Duchess's wardrobe. Morrison had arranged everything else: fresh horses, trusted drivers, a destination known only to Adrian and his most loyal staff. Where are we going? Eleanor asked as the carriage jolted over rough road. A hunting lodge on the northern edge of my property. It's been closed for years. Most people have forgotten it exists. Adrian's face was shadowed in the darkness. We'll be safe there while I deal with this. Deal with what exactly? Someone threw a brick? That's hardly. Someone threw a brick with a death threat through my window, Eleanor. That's not random vandalism. His voice was tight with controlled fury. Whoever did this knew where you were, knew we were in that library. That level of surveillance requires planning. Eleanor's stomach clenched. You think someone's been watching the house for days? I think someone wants you frightened enough to leave my protection. And I think they're willing to escalate if intimidation doesn't work. The implications settled over Eleanor like a shroud. My family. Possibly. Your father is desperate, your mother is vindictive, and Thomas just had his life destroyed. Adrian's jaw tightened. Any of them might think violence is justified. They wouldn't. Eleanor stopped. Would they? A week ago, she would have said her family would never force her to attend her sister's wedding, would never sacrifice her happiness for social advancement, would never abandon her completely. She'd been wrong about all of it. We'll know soon enough, Adrian said. Morrison has people investigating. If your family is involved, we'll have proof by morning. The carriage turned onto an even rougher path, branches scraping against the sides. Eleanor caught glimpses of dense forest through the window, trees pressing close like watching sentinels. After what felt like hours, but was probably only one, the carriage stopped. Adrian stepped out first, surveying their surroundings before helping Eleanor down. The hunting lodge was smaller than she'd expected, a 2-story stone building with dark windows and overgrown gardens. It looked abandoned, which was probably the point. It's not Ravencrest, Adrian said quietly, but it's secure and secret. He unlocked the door with a key from his coat. Inside, the air smelled of dust and disuse. Adrian lit a lamp, revealing a main room with stone fireplace, worn furniture, and walls lined with hunting trophies. The staff prepared the bedrooms this afternoon, he said. There's food in the kitchen. We'll be comfortable enough for a few days. Eleanor moved to the window, looking out at the darkness. And if whoever threatened me finds us here, they won't. Adrian's voice was absolutely certain. Only 3 people know about this place. Morrison, my head of security, and now you. We're invisible here. The guards carried in their bags, then took up positions outside. Adrian built a fire in the massive hearth, coaxing flames from dry wood until warmth began to fill the room. Eleanor sank into a chair, exhaustion finally catching up with her. This is insane. A week ago I was preparing for my sister's wedding. Now I'm hiding in a hunting lodge because someone wants to kill me. Not kill. Adrian's voice was sharp. Frighten. There's a difference. Is there? That note said exactly what it needed to say to make you run back to your family, to make you think my protection isn't worth the danger. Adrian moved to pour amber liquid into 2 glasses. He pressed one into Eleanor's hands. Drink. You need it. Eleanor drank. The whiskey burned, but it steadied her nerves. Adrian settled into the chair across from her, firelight playing across his features. He looked tired, she realized. The careful control he always wore had cracked slightly, revealing the strain beneath. I'm sorry, she said quietly. His eyes snapped to hers. For what? For bringing this chaos into your life. You were fine before you interrupted that wedding. Now you're hiding in your own hunting lodge because of me. Eleanor. Adrian leaned forward, elbows on knees. I chose this, every part of it, and I'd choose it again without hesitation. Why? The question burst from her. Why risk everything for someone you barely know? Adrian was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire. When he spoke, his voice was raw. Because I spent 14 years watching my mother die slowly in a cage she couldn't escape. Because I had power even then, money, title, influence, and I did nothing. I was a coward who convinced myself there was nothing I could do. His hands clenched into fists. When she died, I swore I'd never be that coward again. That if I ever had the chance to help someone trapped the way she was trapped, I'd take it, no matter the cost. He looked at Eleanor, and the pain in his dark eyes took her breath away. You were trapped, Eleanor, by your family's expectations, by society's rules, by a man who saw you as property, and I had the power to free you. So I did. Eleanor's throat tightened. That's not the whole truth, is it? Adrian's jaw worked. No. Then tell me, please, the real reason. Adrian stood abruptly, moving to the window. His back was to her, shoulders tense. Because I've been half in love with you for 3 years, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Because I watched you show kindness to people who didn't deserve it, and strength in situations that should have broken you. Because every time I saw you at some ridiculous society function, making yourself smaller so everyone else could feel bigger, I wanted to. He stopped, hands bracing against the window frame. Eleanor's heart hammered. Wanted to what? To give you the world. Adrian's voice was raw. To show you that you didn't have to shrink, that you could take up space and be brilliant and difficult and wonderful, and someone would choose you anyway. The confession hung in the air between them, fragile and dangerous. Eleanor stood on shaking legs. Adrian, look at me. He didn't move. Please. Slowly he turned. The expression on his face was one she'd never seen, open, vulnerable, terrified. I told you, he said quietly, there are lines I won't cross. Not while you're dependent on me, not while… What if I wasn't dependent on you? Eleanor took a step forward. What if I had my own money, my own position, my own choices? Would the lines still exist then? Adrian's eyes darkened. Eleanor, answer the question. His jaw tightened. No. If the power between us was equal, if you could walk away at any moment without losing everything… He stopped. But we're not there yet. You're still under my protection, still vulnerable. Then make me less vulnerable. Eleanor's voice was steady despite her racing heart. You said you'd give me independence, resources, employment. Do it. Really do it. Make me powerful enough that choosing you would be a real choice. Adrian stared at her. You want me to give you enough power to leave me? I want you to trust that I won't. The silence stretched between them, charged and electric. Then Adrian moved, closing the distance in 3 strides. He stopped inches from her, close enough that Eleanor could feel the heat radiating from his body. If I do this, he said, his voice low and intense, if I give you everything, money, position, independence, and you choose to walk away, it will destroy me. Do you understand that? Eleanor met his eyes. And if you don't, if you keep me in this gilded cage where I'm safe but powerless, it will destroy me. Do you understand that? Adrian's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. You're the bravest person I've ever met, he whispered. Then he stepped back, the moment breaking. Tomorrow, he said, his voice rough. Tomorrow, I'll have Morrison bring the papers. We'll establish you as a full partner in my philanthropic ventures with your own income and authority. You'll have enough money to live independently for the rest of your life. Enough power that choosing to stay with me or choosing to leave will be entirely your decision. Eleanor's breath caught. You're serious? Always. Adrian moved to the door. Get some rest. We have a lot to plan. He left before Eleanor could respond. She stood in the firelit room, her heart racing and her mind spinning with the enormity of what had just happened. Adrian Blackthorne, the feared Duke of Ravencrest, had just offered to make her powerful enough to destroy him, and she was terrified by how much she didn't want to leave. Morning came with weak sunlight filtering through dusty windows. Eleanor woke to find Adrian already up, coffee brewing in the kitchen, a stack of papers spread across the dining table. Morrison sent a courier at dawn, he said without preamble. We have answers. Eleanor's stomach clenched. About who threw the brick? Yes. Adrian's expression was grim. It wasn't your family. Relief flooded through her, then confusion. Then who? Lady Pembroke's nephew, a young man with gambling debts and a tendency toward violence when he's been drinking. Adrian slid a document across the table. He was seen leaving a tavern near Ravencrest the night of the incident. Morrison's people found the clothes he wore, still covered in brick dust, and he was stupid enough to brag about it to his drinking companions. Eleanor sank into a chair. Lady Pembroke ordered this? Unlikely. She's cruel, but she's not stupid. More probable that her nephew overheard her complaining about you and decided to take matters into his own hands. Adrian's voice was cold. Either way, he acted, and now he'll face consequences. What kind of consequences? Adrian's smile was sharp. The legal kind. Attempted assault, trespassing, destruction of property. Morrison has already filed charges with the magistrate. But his family can't protect him. I made certain of that. Adrian poured coffee for Eleanor. Lady Pembroke arrived at Ravencrest at dawn, begging me to drop the charges. offering apologies, money, anything I wanted. Eleanor's hands trembled around the cup. What did you tell her? That justice isn't negotiable. Her nephew committed a crime. He'll be prosecuted. Adrian's eyes met hers. And I made it very clear that if anything else happens to you, any threat, any violence, any attempt to harm you in any way, I'll assume it came from her and act accordingly. She must hate me now. She fears you. There's a difference. Adrian leaned against the table. You represent something she can't control. A woman who refused to bow, who chose freedom over security. And now you have the protection of the most powerful man in England. That terrifies her. Eleanor took a sip of coffee, processing everything. So it's over? The threat? This particular threat, yes. But there will be others. Adrian's voice was serious. Your family is desperate. Society is scandalized. People like Lady Pembroke won't forgive easily. We've won this battle, but the war continues. Eleanor set down her cup. Then let's change the battlefield. Adrian's eyebrows rose. What do you mean? Eleanor stood, moving to look out the window at the dense forest surrounding the lodge. An idea was forming, dangerous and brilliant. We've been reacting, she said slowly, defending, hiding, letting them control the narrative while we scramble to protect ourselves. She turned to face Adrian. What if we stopped defending and started attacking? Adrian's eyes narrowed. I'm listening. You said you'd make me a partner in your philanthropic ventures. Give me real authority, real resources. Eleanor's voice grew stronger as the plan crystallized. What if we use that? What if we launch something so public, so visible, that it forces society to acknowledge me not as a scandal, but as someone with actual power? Go on. Eleanor began to pace, her mind racing. You have influence with Parliament, connections to reformers, industrialists, people working to change labor laws and expand education. What if we created a foundation, a major one, focused on helping women in exactly the position I was in? Adrian's expression shifted from skepticism to interest. Women from good families who've been wronged. Women anywhere who have no choices, no resources, no power. Eleanor's voice was passionate now. We could fund education programs, provide legal assistance for women trying to escape bad marriages, create employment opportunities that don't require a husband's permission, make it impossible for families to force daughters into unwanted marriages because those daughters have other options. Adrian was quiet, his dark eyes assessing. It would be controversial. It would be revolutionary. Eleanor moved closer to him. And it would shift the entire conversation about me. Right now, I'm a scandal, the jilted woman living with a duke. But if I'm the face of a major philanthropic initiative, if I'm using my experience to help others, suddenly I'm not a victim or a villain. I'm someone doing important work. You'd be a target, Adrian warned. Every conservative voice in England would attack you, call you radical, dangerous, immoral. Let them. Eleanor's voice was steel. I'd rather be attacked for doing something meaningful than pitied for being helpless. Adrian stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. It was the first real smile she'd seen from him, not cold or calculating or controlled, but genuine and full of admiration. You're magnificent, he said quietly. Heat flooded Eleanor's cheeks. Is that a yes? That's a yes. Adrian moved to the papers on the table. Morrison sent the partnership documents. I'll have them amended to include authority over a new charitable foundation. We'll announce it within the week. That fast? Speed is our advantage. Adrian began sorting through documents. Right now, society is still reeling from the wedding scandal. If we announce the foundation before they've settled on their narrative about you, we control how you're perceived. Eleanor joined him at the table. What about funding? A foundation this size would require, I'll provide initial capital, £50,000 to start. Adrian said it so casually that Eleanor nearly choked. 50,000. Adrian, that's a fortune. It's an investment. His eyes met hers. In you. In this work. In proving that power can be used for something other than maintaining the status quo. Eleanor's throat tightened. Why do you have so much faith in me? Adrian reached across the table, his hand covering hers. Because you've already proven yourself. You chose freedom when it would have been easier to submit. You walked away from everything rather than accept being treated as disposable. You stood up to society's most powerful women and refused to apologize for defending yourself. His thumb traced circles on her wrist. You're not the person they tried to make you, Eleanor. You're stronger, braver, better. And given the resources and authority you deserve, you'll change the world. Eleanor felt tears burning behind her eyes. Not from sadness or fear, from hope. Pure, terrifying, wonderful hope. We should return to Ravencrest, Adrian said, though he didn't release her hand. Start planning. Morrison will need direction on the foundation structure. My solicitors will need to draft articles of incorporation, and will need to schedule a press announcement before the rumors spiral further. Eleanor nodded, not trusting her voice. They spent the morning organizing documents, planning strategy, turning Eleanor's dangerous idea into concrete action. By noon, they were back in the unmarked carriage, racing toward Ravencrest with a plan that would either save Eleanor's reputation or destroy it completely. The estate was in chaos when they arrived. Morrison met them at the door, his expression harried. Your Grace, thank heavens. The reporters have been circling like vultures. Lady Ashworth sent 3 messengers. Your solicitor is in the study demanding an audience, and, he lowered his voice, Lord Whitmore is camped at the front gate with a magistrate, demanding to see his daughter. Adrian's jaw tightened. Tell Lord Whitmore that Miss Whitmore is not available. Tell the reporters I'll have a statement by tomorrow. Tell my solicitor I'll see him in an hour. He looked at Eleanor. Are you ready for this? Eleanor thought about her father at the gate, still trying to control her, about the reporters eager for scandal, about society waiting to see if she'd break. I'm ready, she said. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of planning and preparation. Adrian's solicitors worked around the clock drafting incorporation papers for the foundation. Morrison coordinated with sympathetic newspapers, planting stories about Eleanor's charitable intentions. Mrs. Crawford helped Eleanor select a wardrobe that projected both respectability and authority. And through it all, Adrian remained at Eleanor's side, advising, supporting, ensuring she had everything she needed to succeed. On the 4th day, they stood together in Adrian's study, reviewing the final documents before the public announcement. The Whitmore Foundation for Women's Independence, Eleanor read aloud, dedicated to providing education, legal assistance, and economic opportunity to women of all backgrounds. With you as founding director, Adrian added, full authority over operations, funding allocation, and strategic direction. Your word is law within the foundation. Eleanor looked up at him. This is really happening. It is. Adrian moved around the desk. Tomorrow morning, we'll announce it to the press. By tomorrow afternoon, every paper in London will be covering it. By tomorrow evening, you'll either be celebrated as a visionary philanthropist or condemned as a radical threat to social order. Probably both, Eleanor said dryly. Adrian smiled. Probably, but you'll have power either way, real, tangible power that no one can take from you. He pulled a document from his coat. One more thing. This is a trust I've established in your name. £20,000, completely independent of the foundation, invested in secure holdings that generate annual income. Eleanor's hand shook as she took the document. Adrian, I can't. You can. And you will. His voice was firm. This money is yours, Eleanor. Not the foundation's, not mine. Yours. If you decide tomorrow that you hate this life and want to leave England entirely, you'll have the resources to do it. If you decide you never want to see me again, you'll have enough income to live comfortably wherever you choose. Eleanor stared at the document. £20,000. More money than most people saw in a lifetime. Enough to buy a house, start a business, live independently anywhere in the world. Enough to truly be free. Why? She whispered. Adrian cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. Because I love you, he said simply. And love means giving you choices, even if one of those choices is walking away from me. Eleanor's breath stopped. You love me? Desperately, completely. Probably since that first night at the Devonshire ball 3 years ago, when you defended a stranger and didn't care who was watching. His thumb traced her cheekbone. But I won't ask you to love me back. Not yet. Not until you're powerful enough that choosing me is a real choice, not a survival strategy. Tears spilled down Eleanor's cheeks. You're giving me everything I need to leave you. Yes. And if I don't leave? If I choose to stay? Adrian's eyes darkened. Then you'll have chosen me, knowing you had other options, and that will mean more than anything else in the world. Eleanor stood on her toes, bringing her face inches from his. You're insane. Probably. Adrian's smile was soft. But I meant what I said. Some things are worth the risk. Eleanor closed the final distance between them, pressing her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative. Then Adrian made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, one hand tangling in her hair while the other wrapped around her waist. Eleanor melted into him, into the heat and strength and desperate tenderness of it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. That was a choice, he said quietly. It was, Eleanor agreed. You have money now, power, options. You could still walk away. Eleanor smiled, fierce and certain. I know, but I'm choosing to stay. I'm choosing you. Adrian's arms tightened around her. Say it again. I choose you, Adrian Blackthorne. Not because I need you, not because you saved me, but because you gave me everything I needed to save myself, and I still want you beside me when I do. The smile Adrian gave her was radiant and unguarded and full of joy. Then let's change the world together, he said. The next morning, Eleanor stood on the steps of Ravencrest Estate facing 30 reporters, a crowd of curious onlookers, and half of London society. She wore a dress of deep blue silk that Adrian had commissioned, elegant, expensive, and absolutely respectable. Mrs. Crawford stood to her left, lending her impeccable reputation as a chaperone. Adrian stood to her right, a visible show of support. Eleanor's hands trembled as she unfolded her prepared statement. 1 week ago, she'd been the woman everyone pitied, the jilted daughter, the scandal. Today, she was something else entirely. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice carrying across the crowd, I stand before you today not as a victim of circumstance, but as someone who has been given the resources and opportunity to help others in similar situations. She saw faces in the crowd, some curious, some hostile, some cautiously supportive. I am pleased to announce the formation of the Whitmore Foundation for Women's Independence, dedicated to providing education, legal assistance, and economic opportunity to women across England who lack the power to determine their own futures. A murmur rippled through the crowd. For too long, women have been forced to accept whatever circumstances their families or society dictate. Forced to marry men they don't love. Forced to remain in situations that harm them. Forced to choose between security and freedom, as if those things are mutually exclusive. Eleanor's voice grew stronger. The Whitmore Foundation will ensure that women have choices. We will fund education programs so women can support themselves without depending on marriage. We will provide legal assistance to women seeking to escape dangerous or untenable situations. We will create employment opportunities that offer real wages and real independence. She looked directly at the reporters. I know many of you have written about my personal circumstances these past weeks, about my family, my choices, the scandals surrounding me. I won't address those stories individually. Instead, I'll say this. I am grateful for every hardship I've endured because it showed me how many women face far worse with far fewer resources. And now I have the power to help them. Eleanor folded her statement. The foundation will begin operations immediately, with offices here at Ravencrest Estate and satellite locations in London, Manchester, and Birmingham. We will accept applications from women of all backgrounds and all circumstances, and we will work tirelessly to ensure that no woman ever again has to choose between her dignity and her survival. The crowd erupted in questions. Reporters shouted over each other. Society matrons whispered furiously. But Eleanor saw something else too. In the back of the crowd, a young woman in a threadbare dress had tears streaming down her face. Beside her, an older woman clutched her daughter's arm, hope written across her features. Scattered throughout the gathering, Eleanor saw faces transformed by the possibility of something they'd thought impossible. Freedom. Adrian stepped forward, his voice cutting through the chaos. Miss Whitmore will not be taking questions at this time. Written inquiries can be submitted to the Foundation's office. Thank you. He guided Eleanor back inside, Mrs. Crawford following. The moment the doors closed, Eleanor's legs gave out. Adrian caught her, holding her steady. "That was perfect," he said quietly. "Absolutely perfect." Eleanor looked up at him, this man who'd upended his entire life to give her power. "What happens now?" "Now?" Adrian smiled. "Now we wait for the world to catch up." They didn't have to wait long. By evening, every major newspaper had run the story. The Times praised Eleanor's philanthropic vision. The Morning Post condemned her radical agenda. The Telegraph ran an editorial calling her both admirably charitable and dangerously revolutionary. Letters began arriving, hundreds of them, some from women begging for help, some from conservative voices demanding the foundation be shut down, some from reformers and radicals praising Eleanor's courage. Society split down the middle. The older generation condemned her. The younger generation debated her. But everyone talked about her. Within a week, Eleanor Whitmore was no longer just a scandal. She was a force. And standing in the foundation's new offices, reviewing applications from women across England who desperately needed help, Eleanor felt something she'd never experienced before. Purpose. Real, tangible, meaningful purpose. Adrian found her there late one evening, surrounded by papers and letters. "You should rest," he said gently. Eleanor looked up. "There are 17 applications here from women trying to escape violent marriages. 23 from young women whose families want to force them into unwanted betrothals. 31 from women who simply want education and have no way to pay for it." Her voice broke slightly. "They're all me, Adrian, different circumstances, different backgrounds, but the same fundamental problem. No power, no choices, no one willing to help." Adrian knelt beside her chair. "And now they have you." "Now they have us," Eleanor corrected. "This foundation exists because you gave me the resources to build it, because you chose to fight for me when no one else would." Adrian took her hands. "I fought for you because you were worth fighting for. And now look at you, changing lives, challenging systems, proving that one person with courage and resources can make a real difference." Eleanor leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "I love you," she whispered. "I should have said it before. I love you, Adrian Blackthorne, not because you saved me, because you gave me the power to save myself and stayed beside me while I learned how." Adrian's arms came around her, holding her close. "Say it again. I love you. Again. I love you." Eleanor pulled back to meet his eyes. "And tomorrow, I'm going to love you while approving funding for these women. And the next day, I'll love you while opening our Manchester office. And the day after that, I'll love you while challenging some antiquated law that treats women as property." Adrian laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Is that a promise?" "It's a threat." Eleanor smiled. "You gave me power, Adrian. Now you have to deal with what I do with it." "I can't wait," Adrian said. And in that moment, surrounded by letters from women who needed help and sitting beside the man who'd risked everything to give her choices, Eleanor Whitmore understood something fundamental. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living. And more than that, she was winning. 3 months after the foundation's announcement, Eleanor stood in the grand ballroom of Ashworth House, surrounded by 300 of London's most powerful people, and felt absolutely no fear. The irony wasn't lost on her. This was the same ballroom where, a year ago, Thomas Ashford had first asked her to dance, where she'd smiled and made herself smaller and hoped desperately that someone might choose her. Now she was here on her own terms, with her own power. And they'd invited her not because of her family connections, those were worthless now, but because the Whitmore Foundation had become impossible to ignore. "You're smiling," Adrian murmured beside her. He looked devastating in formal evening wear, dark coat perfectly tailored, every inch the powerful Duke. "What are you thinking?" "That I used to be terrified of rooms like this," Eleanor said quietly. "Now I just see opportunity." Adrian's hand found the small of her back, a subtle gesture of support. "The Duchess of Somerset is watching us. She looks like she's tasted something bitter." Eleanor glanced across the room. The Duchess stood with Lady Pembroke and Lady Ashworth, the same 3 women who'd come to Ravencrest months ago demanding Eleanor's submission. Their expressions were identical, barely concealed fury mixed with grudging respect. "They're furious because we won," Eleanor said simply. You won, Adrian corrected. I just provided resources. You did everything else. It was true, in a way. In 3 months, the foundation had helped 47 women escape dangerous situations, had funded education for 63 more, had employed another 30 in foundation offices across England. The numbers were small compared to the need, but they were real, tangible. Lives actually changed. And Eleanor had done it all herself, managing staff, reviewing applications, negotiating with landlords and educators and employers. Adrian had stepped back after the initial announcement, letting her build the foundation on her own terms, proving she didn't need him to succeed, though she chose to keep him anyway. Miss Whitmore, a familiar voice cut through her thoughts. Eleanor turned to find Thomas Ashford standing behind her, Catherine at his side. She'd heard the rumors, of course. Thomas and Catherine's marriage was a disaster. Without the Whitmore fortune to prop him up, Lord Whitmore had indeed gone bankrupt, just as Adrian predicted. Thomas had been forced to sell his family's business and take employment with a shipping company. Catherine, accustomed to luxury and social prominence, was now the wife of a clerk. They both looked diminished, older, unhappy. Mr. Ashford, Catherine. Eleanor kept her voice neutral. How unexpected to see you here. Lady Ashworth invited us, Catherine said quickly, her eyes darting nervously. We wouldn't have come if we'd known you. That is, we didn't want to cause discomfort. You're not causing discomfort, Eleanor said truthfully. Looking at them now, she felt nothing. Not anger, not pain, not even satisfaction at their downfall. Just a distant sort of pity for two people who'd sacrificed everything for status and found it empty. I hope you're well. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. Thomas cleared his throat. We heard about your foundation, the work you're doing. It's admirable. Thank you. An awkward silence fell. Adrian's hand pressed more firmly against Eleanor's back. A silent question. Did she want him to intervene? She shook her head slightly. This conversation was hers to navigate. I should apologize, Thomas said finally, for how I treated you, he gestured vaguely. For all of it. I was cruel, calculating. I hurt you deliberately, and I'm sorry. Eleanor studied him. The apology seemed genuine, though whether it came from actual remorse or just the realization that he'd destroyed his own life for nothing, she couldn't tell, and found she didn't care. I accept your apology, she said quietly, but I don't forgive you. What you did shaped who I became, and I'm grateful for that. But I don't forgive it. Thomas nodded, looking deflated. Catherine stepped forward suddenly. I was jealous, she blurted, of you. You were always so clever, so capable. Mother and father expected so much from you, and I could never measure up. When Thomas showed interest in me instead, it felt like finally I'd won something. She laughed bitterly. Turns out I won nothing worth having. A husband who resents me, a life of genteel poverty, parents who won't speak to us because we're an embarrassment. Catherine's voice broke. You were right, Eleanor, about all of it. And I hate that you were right, because it means I destroyed everything for nothing. Eleanor felt Adrian tense beside her, probably expecting her to gloat or condemn. Instead, she surprised herself. The foundation has an opening in our Manchester office, she said slowly. Administrative work. It pays enough to live on, and there's room for advancement if you prove competent. She looked at Catherine directly. It won't be easy. You'd be working for a living, taking orders, doing actual labor instead of just managing servants. But it would be yours, your income, your work, your independence. Catherine stared. You're offering me employment? I'm offering you a choice, which is more than anyone ever gave me. Eleanor's voice was steady. You can stay in this life, married to a man you don't love, living off the charity of people who pity you. Or you can leave, build something new, become someone other than the pretty daughter who married poorly. Catherine's hands twisted her fan. I couldn't possibly. Think about it, Eleanor said. The offer stands. She turned and walked away, Adrian beside her, leaving her sister and her former fiancé standing in the middle of the ballroom, looking lost. That was generous, Adrian said quietly. That was strategic, Eleanor corrected. Catherine in Manchester, actually working and earning her own way? She'll tell every woman she meets about the foundation. Word of mouth is our best advertising. Adrian laughed softly. You're brilliant. I'm learning. Eleanor accepted a glass of champagne from a passing servant. Who taught me that power means using every resource, even unexpected ones? Touché? Adrian guided her toward a quieter corner. Speaking of power, the Duke of Hampshire asked to speak with you. He's on the Committee for Educational Reform, wants to discuss potential partnerships. Eleanor's heart quickened. The Duke of Hampshire had the Queen's ear on education policy. A partnership with him could mean funding for schools across England, could mean the Foundation's reach expanding exponentially. When? Now, if you're willing. He's in the library. Eleanor nodded. Adrian escorted her through the crowded ballroom, past clusters of people who stopped their conversations to watch her pass. Some faces showed approval. Some showed disdain. Most showed a mixture of both. 6 months ago, their stares would have made Eleanor want to disappear. Now she met them with her head high and her spine straight, comfortable in her own power. The Duke of Hampshire was exactly as Eleanor remembered from society functions, elderly, sharp-minded, and refreshingly direct. He stood when they entered the library, offering a courteous bow. Miss Whitmore, Raven Crest, thank you for meeting with me. Your Grace, Eleanor took the seat he indicated. I understand you wanted to discuss the Foundation? Indeed. Hampshire settled into his own chair. I've been following your work with great interest. The educational programs you've established for young women are precisely the sort of initiative Parliament has been discussing. Practical skills, literacy, mathematics, all designed to produce employable workers rather than decorative wives. Eleanor smiled slightly. That's certainly the goal. The problem is funding. Parliament talks endlessly about education reform, but allocating actual resources is another matter entirely. Hampshire leaned forward. However, if a private organization were to establish successful pilot programs that demonstrated clear results, it would be much easier to argue for government support. Eleanor's mind raced. You're suggesting a partnership. The Foundation creates the programs, proves they work, and then Parliament provides funding to expand them nationwide. Precisely. Hampshire's eyes gleamed. I can't promise immediate results. Parliamentary processes are slower than continental drift, but with patience and the right approach, we could change education in England fundamentally. What would you need from us? Detailed reports, financial accounting, success metrics, evidence that these programs actually improve women's employment prospects and economic independence. Hampshire pulled out a document. I took the liberty of drafting a proposal. If you're interested, of course. Eleanor took the document, scanning it quickly. The terms were generous. Hampshire's committee would provide limited initial funding in exchange for the Foundation developing curriculum and training teachers. If the program succeeded, Parliament would consider much larger appropriations. It was exactly the kind of opportunity Eleanor had been hoping for. I'll need to review this with my advisory board, she said, keeping her voice professional despite her racing heart. But preliminarily, this looks very promising. Hampshire smiled. Excellent. I'll await your response. He stood, preparing to leave, then paused. Miss Whitmore, may I speak candidly? Please. When I first heard about your foundation, I thought it was a publicity stunt. A wealthy woman playing at charity to rehabilitate her reputation after a scandal. His expression was serious. I was wrong. You've built something real, something that actually helps people. And you've done it while facing opposition from nearly every established institution in England. He offered his hand. That takes courage and competence, both of which are in short supply among our so-called leaders. I look forward to working with you. Eleanor shook his hand, feeling the weight of the moment. 3 months ago, she'd been a scandal. Now she was a partner to one of Parliament's most influential reformers. After Hampshire left, Eleanor turned to Adrian. Did that just happen? It did. Adrian's smile was proud. You just secured potential government funding for women's education. Congratulations. Eleanor sank into a chair, the enormity of it washing over her. This could change everything. If Parliament actually funds these programs, If we can prove they work, we could help thousands of women, tens of thousands. You could, Adrian agreed, but it will also make you even more controversial. Every conservative voice in England will see this as a threat to the natural order. They'll fight you harder than ever. Eleanor met his eyes. Are you trying to discourage me? I'm making sure you understand the cost. Adrian moved closer. Because once you accept Hampshire's proposal, there's no going back to quiet charity work. You'll be challenging institutions that have existed for centuries. You'll have enemies in Parliament, in the church, in every drawing room in England. I already have those enemies. They'll get worse. Adrian's voice was serious. They'll question your morals, your sanity, your right to exist in polite society. They'll say terrible things about you, about us. And I need to know you're prepared for that. Eleanor stood, moving to the library window. Outside, carriages lined the street, expensive and elegant. Inside, England's elite danced and gossiped and pretended the world wasn't changing. But it was changing, because people like Hampshire were willing to consider new ideas, because women like Eleanor were refusing to stay silent, because power, once granted, was nearly impossible to take back. I'm prepared, she said quietly, because I've already survived the worst they can do. They've already called me scandalous, immoral, unfit for society, and I'm still here, still fighting, still winning. She turned to face Adrian. I was powerless once, voiceless, invisible. I will never be those things again. So let them fight me, let them condemn me, let them exhaust themselves trying to force me back into a cage I've already escaped. Adrian crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. Have I mentioned that I love you? Eleanor smiled against his chest. Not in the last hour. Oversight on my part. Adrian tilted her chin up, his dark eyes intense. I love you, Eleanor Whitmore. Your courage, your brilliance, your absolute refusal to accept the limitations others try to place on you. You're the most remarkable person I've ever met. Eleanor's heart swelled. Even when I'm being difficult and radical and challenging centuries of tradition? Especially then. Adrian's thumb traced her lower lip. Though we should probably discuss the fact that you just offered your sister employment without consulting me. The foundation is mine to run as I see fit. You gave me that authority. I did. Adrian's smile was wry. And now I'm learning what happens when you give a brilliant woman unlimited power. She uses it however she damn well pleases. Eleanor laughed. Having regrets? None. Adrian kissed her forehead. Though I do have a question. What? When are you going to marry me? Eleanor's breath stopped. What? Adrian pulled a small velvet box from his coat. Inside was a ring, a single perfect diamond surrounded by smaller sapphires, elegant and understated and absolutely stunning. I've been carrying this for 2 months, he said quietly, waiting for the right moment, waiting until you'd built enough power that choosing me was clearly your choice, not your only option. He dropped to one knee. Eleanor Whitmore, you are the most extraordinary person I've ever known. You've taken every advantage I gave you and built something far more impressive than I imagined possible. You don't need me for security or status or survival. You don't need me at all. His voice roughened. But I need you. I need your fire and your courage and the way you look at the world and see not what is but what could be. I need the life we could build together, not as Duke and dependent, but as partners working to change everything that's broken. Adrian held up the ring. So I'm asking, not because you need me to ask, but because I need you to say yes. Will you marry me? Will you choose me, knowing you could choose anything else? Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. You're proposing in the middle of a ball while 300 people are dancing in the next room? I'm proposing in the library of the house where Thomas Ashford first courted you, where you learn to make yourself small and acceptable in everything you're not. Adrian's smile was fierce. I'm replacing that memory with this one, with you being asked to be exactly who you are, not who someone needs you to be. Eleanor sank to her knees in front of him, framing his face with her hands. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Not because I need you, but because I want you. Because you gave me everything I needed to walk away, and I'm choosing to stay. Because I love you, Adrian Blackthorne, and I want to spend my life building impossible things with you." Adrian's kiss was desperate and tender and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, he slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands. It fit perfectly. "We should return to the ball," Eleanor said eventually. "People will talk if we're gone too long." "Let them talk." Adrian stood, pulling her to her feet. "We're engaged now. Talking is the least of what they'll do." They returned to the ballroom hand in hand, the ring glittering on Eleanor's finger. It took exactly 30 seconds for someone to notice. Lady Ashworth saw it first. Her expression cycled through shock, outrage, and finally resignation. The whispers spread like wildfire. Within minutes, the entire ballroom knew. The Duke of Ravencrest and Eleanor Whitmore were engaged. Lady Pembroke appeared at Eleanor's elbow, her expression carefully neutral. "May I offer congratulations?" "You may," Eleanor said calmly, "though I suppose congratulations go both ways. You've secured an excellent match, and the Duke has chosen quite the unconventional bride." It was as close to an insult as Lady Pembroke dared, given Adrian's presence. Eleanor smiled sweetly. "Indeed. I'm sure everyone said the same about you when you married the Earl. A merchant's daughter marrying into peerage? How scandalous." Lady Pembroke's face went white. Her own background, carefully hidden for decades, was something she never acknowledged. "That's different," she said stiffly. "Is it?" Eleanor's voice was soft but cutting. "Or is it just that you've forgotten what it's like to be judged for daring to rise above the station society assigned you?" She took Adrian's arm. "Excuse us, we have announcements to make." They moved through the ballroom, accepting congratulations from allies and barely concealed hostility from enemies. The Duchess of Somerset looked like she'd swallowed glass. Thomas and Catherine had disappeared entirely, probably unable to bear watching Eleanor's triumph. Near midnight, Eleanor found herself on the terrace, needing air. Adrian joined her moments later, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. "Escaping?" he asked. "Breathing," Eleanor corrected. "That was intense." "It will get more intense. Once we announce the wedding, the scrutiny will be relentless." Adrian handed her a glass. "Every conservative voice will condemn our marriage as proof that society is collapsing. Every reformer will hold us up as an example of progress. We'll be symbols whether we want to be or not." Eleanor sipped her champagne. "I can think of worse fates." "So can I." Adrian moved to stand beside her at the railing. "Though I should warn you, being the Duchess of Ravencrest comes with expectations. Social obligations, charitable work, managing the estate when I'm conducting business. I'm already doing charitable work. The foundation won't stop because I'm married." "I know, I'm counting on it." Adrian turned to face her. "What I'm trying to say, badly, is that I don't expect you to become someone else when we marry. I expect you to be exactly who you are now. Difficult, brilliant, challenging every tradition that deserves challenging." Eleanor's throat tightened. "Most men want wives who make their lives easier." "Most men are idiots." Adrian's smile was soft. "I want a partner who makes me better, who challenges me to use my power for something meaningful, who reminds me every day that wealth and status are worthless unless they're used to help people who need it." He took her free hand. "I want you, Eleanor. All of you. The scandal and the brilliance and the absolute refusal to accept the world as it is. I want the life we'll build together, changing things that need changing and making enemies of people who deserve to be enemies." Eleanor set down her champagne and wrapped her arms around him. "When you proposed, you said you needed me." "I do." "Why?" "Really?" Adrian was quiet for a moment. "Because before you, I was powerful, but purposeless. I had wealth and title and influence, but I used it all to maintain distance, to protect myself from caring too much, to avoid the pain I felt watching my mother suffer." His arms tightened around her. "You changed that. You showed me that power means nothing if it's not used to protect people who need protection. That caring isn't weakness, it's the only thing that makes any of this worthwhile." He pulled back to meet her eyes. "I need you because you make me want to be better than I am, and because you believe I can be." Eleanor kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. "We're going to change the world," she whispered. Yes, Adrian agreed. We are. The wedding took place 6 weeks later in the private chapel at Ravencrest Estate. It was nothing like Catherine's elaborate ceremony. No crowds of spectators, no public spectacle, no performance for society's benefit. Just 60 people who actually mattered to them. Hampshire and several other reformist lords. Women Eleanor had helped through the foundation. Morrison and Mrs. Crawford and the Ravencrest staff who'd become family. A few genuine friends who'd supported Eleanor through everything. No one from Eleanor's blood family attended. They hadn't been invited. Eleanor wore a gown of ivory silk, simpler than fashion dictated but more elegant for it. No excessive lace, no elaborate train. Just clean lines and perfect tailoring and a dress that made her feel like herself. She carried no flowers. Instead, she held a leather-bound copy of the Foundation's charter, the document that had transformed her from victim to victor. Adrian waited at the altar in formal black, his expression unguarded for once. When Eleanor walked down the aisle, alone, having refused to be given away, as if she were property, his eyes never left hers. The ceremony was brief and traditional except for one change. When the officiant reached the vows, Eleanor and Adrian had written their own. Adrian went first, his voice steady and sure. Eleanor, I promise to never try to make you smaller, to support every bold choice and impossible dream, to use my power to ensure you always have choices of your own, to love you not in spite of your difficulty but because of it. Eleanor's turn. Adrian, I promise to never let you hide from caring, to challenge you when you need challenging and support you always, to build a life with you that changes what's broken and protects what's good, to love you not because I need you, but because I choose you every single day. When they sealed their vows with a kiss, the small congregation erupted in applause. Eleanor Whitmore became Eleanor Blackthorne, Duchess of Ravencrest. And nothing changed, and everything changed. The foundation continued growing. Within a year, they'd helped 200 women. Within 2 years, Parliament allocated funding for educational programs based on the foundation's model. Within 3 years, Eleanor was testifying before committees, advising on legislation, and becoming one of the most influential voices in English reform. Conservative papers condemned her regularly. Progressive papers praised her just as often. She was controversial, radical, impossible to ignore. And she was happy. Not because her life was easy, it wasn't. The work was exhausting, the opposition relentless, the criticism constant, but it was her work, her choice, her life. 5 years after the wedding that almost was, Eleanor stood in the Foundation's London headquarters reviewing applications when Morrison appeared in the doorway. Your Grace, you have a visitor. She says it's urgent. Eleanor looked up. Who? Morrison's expression was carefully neutral. Your sister. Eleanor's pen stilled. She hadn't seen Catherine since offering her that job 5 years ago. Catherine had refused, choosing to stay with Thomas. Eleanor had heard through gossip that their marriage had deteriorated further, that Catherine was miserable, that Thomas drank too much and blamed her for everything. Show her in. Catherine entered looking older than her years, her pretty face lined with stress. She wore a dress that had been expensive once, but was now obviously mended and out of fashion. Eleanor, she said quietly, thank you for seeing me. Sit. Eleanor gestured to a chair. What do you need? Catherine's eyes filled with tears. I need help. I need to leave Thomas. I've tried, but I have no money, no skills, nowhere to go. My parents won't help. They're still living off charity themselves. And I know I have no right to ask you, not after everything, but... She broke off, crying openly now. Eleanor studied her sister, saw the desperation, the genuine pain, saw a woman who'd made terrible choices and was finally ready to face the consequences. The job I offered you 5 years ago, Eleanor said quietly. It's still available. Different office, same terms. You'd be working for a living, taking orders, building a life from nothing. Catherine looked up, hope and fear warring on her face. No one deserves anything, Eleanor interrupted. We make choices and face consequences. You chose poorly. Now you're choosing differently. That's all that matters. She pulled out a form. Fill this out. Be honest about your skills and experience. If you're accepted, you'll start at the bottom like everyone else. No special treatment because you're my sister. You'll succeed or fail on your own merits. Catherine took the form with shaking hands. Why are you doing this? Eleanor considered the question. Because someone gave me a chance when I needed it. Because I remember what it's like to be trapped with no options. And because you're my sister, and despite everything, I don't want to see you destroyed by your own mistakes. She leaned back. But Catherine, this is your last chance. If you take this job and throw it away, if you complain or fail to work hard or expect special treatment, I won't help you again. Understood? Catherine nodded, tears streaming down her face. Understood. Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you. After Catherine left, clutching the application like a lifeline, Eleanor sat in her office feeling the strange fullness of having power and using it well. She could have refused, could have let Catherine suffer the consequences of her choices without intervention, but she'd chosen mercy instead. Not because Catherine deserved it, but because Eleanor could afford to give it. That evening, she told Adrian about Catherine's visit over dinner. You gave her another chance, he said. It wasn't a question. I did. Even though she betrayed you, even though she chose Thomas over her own sister. Even though, Eleanor took a sip of wine. Because I have the power to help, and using power to punish people who are already suffering seems pointless. Adrian smiled, that soft expression reserved only for her. You're a better person than I am. No, I just remember what it's like to need help and have everyone refuse. I won't be that person to anyone, even people who've hurt me. Adrian reached across the table, taking her hand. Have I mentioned recently that you're extraordinary? Not in the last few hours. Oversight on my part. His thumb traced her wedding ring. How was your day otherwise, besides reforming wayward sisters? Eleanor laughed. Hampshire's education bill passed second reading in Parliament. We'll have funding for 10 new schools by next year. Congratulations. The Duchess of Somerset wrote another editorial condemning the foundation as a threat to family values. She's still fighting you? She'll never stop. I represent everything she fears, a woman with power who refuses to wield it the way she thinks appropriate. Eleanor squeezed his hand. But she's losing. Slowly, painfully, but losing. Every woman we help is proof that her worldview is dying. Adrian stood, moving around the table to pull Eleanor to her feet. Dance with me. There's no music. There's always music. Adrian wrapped his arms around her, swaying gently. Do you remember the Ashworth ball? Where we met? Where you proposed, you mean? Eleanor rested her head against his chest. Of course I remember. I was terrified that night, terrified you'd say no, that giving you power and freedom would mean watching you walk away. Eleanor pulled back to meet his eyes. And instead? Instead, you chose me anyway. Every day for 5 years, you've chosen me. And every day, I'm grateful. Eleanor kissed him softly. I'll choose you tomorrow too, and the day after that, and every day until we're old and gray and still arguing about how to change the world. Promise? Promise. They danced in the dining room of Ravencrest Estate. No music but the sound of their breathing, no audience but themselves. Outside, England continued its slow, painful progress toward change. Inside, two people who'd chosen each other against all odds held tight and dreamed of impossible things. 10 years after the wedding that almost was, Eleanor stood before Parliament's Education Committee, presenting evidence that the Foundation's programs had increased women's employment rates by 40% in cities where they operated. 20 years later, she testified in support of legislation that would make it illegal to force women into marriage against their will. 30 years later, she watched the first generation of women educated through Foundation programs become teachers, business owners, and advocates for change themselves. And through it all, Adrian stood beside her, supporting, challenging, loving her with the same fierce certainty he'd shown that day in the chapel when he'd objected to a wedding and changed both their lives forever. They had 3 children, 2 daughters and a son, and raised them to believe that power meant responsibility, that privilege meant obligation, and that the only unforgivable sin was having the ability to help and choosing not to. Eleanor's daughter would go on to fight for women's suffrage. Her granddaughter would become one of England's first female physicians. Her great-granddaughter would stand in Parliament itself, representing a constituency that had once thought women had no place in politics. But Eleanor didn't know any of that yet. She only knew this. She'd been discarded, humiliated, treated as disposable. And she'd refused to accept it. She'd walked away from everything familiar and built something new, something that mattered, something that would outlast her and everyone who'd tried to break her. On a bright autumn morning 40 years after the wedding that almost was, Eleanor stood in the gardens at Ravencrest Estate watching her grandchildren play. Adrian sat beside her, his hair gray now, but his eyes still sharp and full of love. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Walking out of that chapel, choosing this life?" Eleanor looked at the foundation building visible in the distance, at the family she'd built, at the man who'd given her everything by giving her nothing but choices. "Never," she said simply. "Not once." Adrian's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining as they had for 4 decades. "Good," he said, "because I'd do it all again. Every scandal, every battle, every moment." Eleanor leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. "So would I." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the future they'd built together play out in front of them. And Eleanor Blackthorne, who'd once been the overlooked daughter nobody chose, smiled. Because she'd chosen herself. And that had made all the difference.